This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of What If Naruto Was Unalive by Sasuke during Sasuke Retrieval arc. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
The Shinobi World, Konoha. As they got closer to Konoha's main gate, Ichigo, Naruto, and the other Shinigamis looked up. Only Naruto and Soifun had their hoods up, while everyone else was wearing their black cloaks. Ichigo looked at his pass, then at the mask, wearing Naruto and Soifun. Ichigo looked at Naruto and said, "So, why does my pass have my actual name on it, and yet yours and Soifun's are aliases?" Soifun had provided each group member with a pass that was required to enter any of the shinobi villages prior to their arrival in Konoha. While Naruto and Soifun's passes were written with aliases, Ichigo, Renji, and Tashiro's passes were all signed with their real names. The alias of Naruto was Menma, and that of Soifun was Wasupu. Naruto turned to Ichigo, and when he spoke, the mask changed his voice so that it sounded exactly like him but also like his father, Minato. Unlike Soifun. "I mean, Wasupu and I. No one knows who you are, Ichigo, so you can use your name without much difficulty. That's also the reason why you're acting as an escort for us." The Shinigami's initial plan was to travel to Konoha, where Soifun had secret access to every network in the village, including the renowned Sanin Jiraiya spy network. This was done to find out anything they could about their targets and, more crucially, where they would next attack. It was Renji and Hitsugaya's responsibility to find the Jinchurikis outside of their villages and return them there or, in the event that they went missing, to any other secure area. Since traveling nobles in the shinobi world frequently kept their identities a secret, Naruto and Soifun would be traveling under the guise that they were members of the Land of Grass Daimyo's family in order to reduce suspicions about their true identities. Ichigo would be serving as their escort, pretending that they had been on a trip to the Land of Waves. Before choosing their next course of action, Naruto and his group would meet up with Renji and Hitsugaya at the Kanabi Bridge in the Land of Grass after obtaining their intelligence, which would take at least a few days. As Ichigo listened to Naruto and Soifun's explanation, he scratched his head. Are the Konoha ninjas really gonna buy such a story? They sound like a bunch of dull group of people if they are. Well, they had better, or we might have a group of those pesky shinobi from the Anbu Black Ops division tailing us for hours after we leave Konoha. As the group arrived at the gate, Ichigo sighed but said nothing. The shinobi world, Konoha Cemetery, after 3 days. A tall person with black hair spikes crossed the cemetery and paused in front of 2 adjacent graves. He was dressed in dark blue pants and a sleeveless dark gray shirt. He also wore a dark gray Konoha headband around his neck and a pair of black metal gauntlets for his forearms. 2 blades, a wakizashi and a kodachi, were worn diagonally opposite one another on his back. The person was Uchiha Sasuke, who had just returned from a visit to his father's and mother's graves. He was standing in front of 2 tombstones, bowing and pressing his hands together in remembrance of the 2 departed. Along with a few other items to commemorate their memories, the names of the 4th Hokage, Namikaze Minato, and his wife, Uzumaki Kushina, were carved on the 2 tombstones, which were adorned with dark red roses and pale yellow lilies. Sasuke straightened up from his bow and whispered, "4th Hokage, Uzumaki Kushina," with his eyes closed. "Why didn't I listen to Naruto sooner?" Since the Konoha shinobis were unaware of Naruto's true condition following the battle at the Valley of the End, he was thought to be missing and not dead. The council had not penalized Sasuke for his actions after Sakura and the others stepped in. Although he still desired to track down Orochimaru and exact revenge on Itachi, Jiraiya chose to disclose Naruto's heritage, a few more significant facts about him, and the reason Naruto had gone to such lengths is to bring Sasuke back after realizing how important Sasuke was to Naruto. Sasuke felt a great deal of guilt for attempting to kill his best friend after learning the truth about Naruto and his conscience starting to weigh heavily on him. Even though Sasuke still had the power of the curse mark, this also led him to awaken the Mangekyo Sharingan, which cleared Orochimaru's consciousness of the mark. Then, he made the decision to set aside his thirst for vengeance in order to track down Naruto and return him to Konoha. A year later, just before Naruto's mission, Sasuke confronted Itachi. After explaining his plans and stating that he would not pursue and kill Itachi until he had returned Naruto to Konoha, Itachi realized how much he had changed and chose to tell Sasuke the truth about the night of the massacre. Sasuke lost his desire for vengeance after hearing this, but at Itachi's insistence, they agreed to fight right then and there, if only to resolve the matter permanently. Because of Itachi's illness, which had left him nearly blind from overusing his Mangekyo Sharingan, Sasuke defeated him. Then, as a final request, Itachi asked Sasuke to take his own eyes and use them to defend Konoha. After Sasuke was declared dead, Sakura, who had been there the entire time, went ahead and implanted Itachi's eyes into him. After obtaining the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, Sasuke's determination to find Naruto intensified, and he began preparing for the inevitable encounter with Tobi. Furthermore, Sai, who had temporarily replaced Naruto as a team member, and the other members of the Konoha 11 were prepared to give him another chance because he was improving. Because of the past, Sasuke went to see the graves of Minato and Kushina once a year on the day he had battled Naruto at the Valley of the End. Sasuke.kun. When Sasuke opened his eyes and looked up from his reverie, he saw Sakura standing behind him with her hands clasped in front of her. Sakura had grown out her hair and now wore it in a long ponytail that hung past her neck. She looked and dressed a lot like the person she was a few years ago. Her body had more curves, and she was taller now. She now wore a mesh bodysuit underneath her red top that ended just above her belly button, a red miniskirt with slits on the sides, and a red sleeveless top that ended just below her bosom. She wore them under her miniskirt with bandages wrapped around her left leg, and the mesh continued all the way up to her forearms, where it ended. She was still wearing her typical long black boots and her headband behind her front bangs. Sasuke whispered, "Sakura, what is it? The others have already headed out, and Sai's waiting for us right now," Sakura replied. "Very well," Sasuke sighed, before turning around and leaving after taking one final look at the two graves. Sakura opened her mouth to say something as Sasuke went by. "It's been 3 years since Naruto disappeared," she stated. Sasuke.kun. "Do you think that we'll ever find him?" Beside her, Sasuke paused, his head bent. "We'll find him, Sakura, we just have to." Sakura gave a nod, and they both disappeared as they headed to meet Sai. As they passed through the Konoha training grounds, Ichigo turned to face Naruto. "Oi, Nar. I mean, oi, Menma. I guess that the Konoha shinobis aren't a bunch of idiots after all." "This happened because you called them that, Ichigo," he sighed. A wave of Fuma shurikens flew in their direction, and he, Ichigo, and Soifun abruptly used Flash Step to avoid them. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise as the three of them turned to face the 9 figures standing behind them. "They had to send my friends out of all the people they could have sent." As his friends from teams Asuma Kurenai and Guy confronted him and his friends, Naruto pondered. One of the characters moved forward and held out his hand. He was dressed in matching pants, a dark navy gray apron tied around his waist, and a long white robe-like shirt with loose sleeves that closed on the right shoulder. He gestured to a woman standing beside him who had Chinese-style buns on either side of her head. "Please forgive Tenten's rudeness just now," he said. "My name is Hyuga Neji, a Jonin of this village. Now, please stand down and make this as easy as possible for the both of us. We have been ordered by the Hokage to arrest you 3 and bring you in for questioning." Ichigo grasped the hilt of his sealed Zanpakuto, which was holstered on the back of his cloak, and bared his teeth. "Screw you, guys. You can take those orders and shove them up your ass if you guys think that we're just gonna go anywhere with you guys." "What?" Tenten smirked as she gestured to Ichigo. "You seriously think that we can't take care of a bunch of lost bakas? There's 9 of us or 3 of you, baka." "She's right, orange-haired kid," muttered a rather plump man with long, spiky brown hair that fell past his back. "We've got the advantage by sheer numbers alone." Ichigo spit out, "Oi, I wasn't talking to you, you fat ass." The figure's face flushed, and Naruto pulled away from Ichigo. "Oh no, Choji fat was just called that by that baka. We're completely screwed." "W. What did you just call me?" Choji muttered sharply. His fist drew back as he charged at Ichigo, seemingly exploding. "I'm not fat, you baka. I'm just pleasently plump." When Soifun moved between them and stopped Choji's punch, Choji's eyes widened abruptly. She stopped my punch with a single hand." Ichigo muttered, "Maybe I should have just said no," as he watched the other 8 figures form their positions. As he reached for his Zanpakuto, Naruto complained, "Gee, you think?" Choji winced as Soifun tightened her hold on his fist, and she cast a sidelong glance back at the 2. "Save your strength for the 3 other ninjas heading this way, you 2, she stated. "I'll deal with these guys myself." Neji squinted as he performed a few hand seals in a hurry, Byakugan. Gazing at Soifun, he thought, this woman. If I'm not mistaken, she's probably a strong cage. And the 2 males are even more powerful than that. This will be difficult." A small thrill of excitement arose inside Soifun, and her mouth curled into a broad smile. "Bring it." Neji moved his feet and sprang forward at a remarkable pace, piercing her heart with his outstretched palm. Anticipating this, Soifun clenched her fist around Choji's flung him over her shoulders, and let him fall to the ground while using her foot to kick up at Neji's arm. "Lee, now!" Neji exclaimed, turning to face a bulldog-cut figure dressed in a rough green flak jacket over a green jumpsuit. Lee yelled, "Get ready, intruder," and kicked Soifin quickly with a mix of high and low kicks. She easily avoided all of his kicks, and her eyes narrowed a little. He's not very good at anything, but he's fast enough, so I'll give him that. He swept his leg at her feet and abruptly squatted on the ground. As Soifin dodged every blow Neji threw at her, she caught a glimpse of this out of the corner of her eye and grabbed her Zanpakuto, spinning in midair and stabbing it into the ground. She swiftly kicked both taijutsu practitioners in quick succession, knocking them backwards. Mind Transfer Jutsu. When Soifin noticed a blonde girl staring at her with her arms extended and her thumbs, middle, and index fingers arranged in a circle, her eyes widened a little in surprise. Before the figure could react, she appeared behind her and knocked her unconscious with a swift flash step to avoid the jutsu. With his fist outstretched, Choji ran in her direction. He exclaimed, "Partial expansion jutsu." The ground beneath him crackled and rumbled as his right arm suddenly grew wide and he slammed his fist into the spot that Soifin was just at. Soifin threw him over her and sent him crashing into a tree after wrapping her legs around his neck and doing a backflip. Suddenly, she felt a figure behind her and turned, shielding herself from an attack by a long, black-haired girl with eyes that resembled the first figure's. "Hado number 1. Show," Soifin exclaimed, gesturing to the girl. A disheveled, brown-haired figure screamed, "Hinata," as she crashed into a tree. As Soifin emerged behind her and gave her a knee to the stomach, knocking her unconscious, he cursed. "Damn it, just what the hell is she?" His eyes narrowed as he hurried over to Soifin. He roared, "Let's go, Akamaru," while a big white dog ran alongside him. Ninpo. Beast-human clone. Akamaru abruptly vanished into a smoke cloud and reappeared as a perfect replica of his owner. He roared, fang over fang, and he and his copy leapt into the air, spinning at a nearly violent pace. As Soifin fell to the ground, she yelled, "Too weak," and kicked them both, sending them flying into the air as they passed over her. She squatted on the ground, leapt into the air, turned over, and gave them both a dropkick. Thud. Both figures slammed into the ground, as if the ground were about to explode. A figure in a sea-green jacket with a high upturned collar and a hood covering his face reached out and flung a swarm of insects in her direction. He yelled, "Go, my insects," as the insects flocked toward her. Taking her Zanpakuto, Soifin levitated it in midair by lightly tapping the handle's end, which caused it to spin in place. Hado number 58. Tenrin. To Shino's surprise, the Zanpakuto unleashed a massive tornado-like blast that blew all the insects away. Soifin took advantage of the situation to flash step toward him and knock him unconscious by slamming her elbow into his back. Behind her, a voice yelled, "Take this." A huge cloud of smoke surrounded Soifin as she turned to see Tenten unfolding a gigantic scroll. As a flurry of shurikens and kunais flew in her direction, Soifin grabbed her Zanpakuto and spun it with both hands. Soifin sped towards Tenten and slammed her foot into her stomach, saying, "You idiots need to learn your place," with a hint of venom in her voice. Tenten let out a cry as she shot skyward, colliding with a big rock that was in her path. "Now," Soifin sighed, tearing her knuckles. "Who's left?" "I suppose that's me," a voice on her right said. When Soifin looked back, she saw a man with long jet black hair pulled back in a spiky ponytail staring at her with a look that was almost lazy. "My name's Nara Shikamaru," he yawned. "Pleased to meet you." He knelt on one knee and slowly clasped his hands together. "Anyways, I don't want to get yelled at by the Hokage, so if you're gonna knock me out, then do it quickly." Shadow Possession Jutsu. When a thin line of shadow appeared from Shikamaru's own shadow, touching and merging with the shadows around him, Soifin's eyes narrowed. Soifin looked around her and thought, this is the Shadow Possession Jutsu. As several shadows that resembled sharp needles sprang out at her from the shadows around her, she abruptly leapt into the air. Soifin said, "What a troublesome ability," and quickly moved out of the way before one of the shadows could get to her. Shikamaru sighed, "Shut up and get caught already. Anyways, you're right. My Shadow Possession Jutsu allows me to use my surrounding shadows in order to bind or attack my opponents. This particular jutsu is called the Shadow Sewing Jutsu. This allows me to use the shadows around me as weapon in order to attack my opponents if you haven't noticed already." What's he talking about? As she avoided the shadow needles, Soifin pondered. Although he doesn't appear to be that kind, it sounds like, wait, is he? Leaf Hurricane. Whoa. Flash stepped away, barely avoiding Lee as his leg touched her cloak, and Soifin turned around. This guy appears to be lazy, but he's actually quite strong. He's smarter than I thought, and undoubtedly intelligent. Shikamaru just used one of his shadow needles to grab Lee and gently place him on the ground after Soifin grabbed his leg and threw him at him. Thanks, Shikamaru-kun, Lee exclaimed, removing his jacket. When Shikamaru saw that Soifin was no longer there, his eyes grew wide. Whoa! I look away from her for a moment and... As he blacked out, Soifin was standing behind him when his eyes abruptly rolled to the back of his head. Lee was tripped as she swiftly fell to the ground and swept at his legs. Soifin grabbed him by the arm and quickly slammed a blow into his neck. Stupid kids, she muttered as she made her way back to Ichigo and Naruto's position. Before healing the group of ninjas, Naruto approached the vanquished ninjas in silence, put his hands on the ones that were still conscious, and used Hakafuku to put them to sleep. I'm sorry, guys, but I can't let you interfere, he replied. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of 3 figures behind Ichigo and Soifin out of the corner of his eye. Sakura, Sasuke, and another pale figure with black hair wearing a dark gray shirt and matching pants made up the 3 figures. Ichigo turned to face Naruto after taking a quick look at the figures. I'll take care of these 3, Menma. Naruto gave a nod. Don't kill them, though, they're only trying to defend Konoha. Anyways, once you beat them, we have to leave. I know, Ichigo said softly as he grabbed his Zanpakuto. He gazed calmly at the 3 figures and held it out in front of him. That girl must be Sakura, and the man in the middle must be Sasuke. The third figure's smile, which Naruto observed to be even more phony than Aizen's, asked, So, does your huge sword actually serve a purpose, or are you just compensating from something? Ichigo blinked. Huh? I'm sorry, the figure said, grinning. Maybe I should have been more clear. I meant to ask, do you have dick? Huh? Soifin and Naruto found it difficult to contain their laughter as Ichigo's face flushed. With a humorous frown, he exclaimed, What the hell kind of threat was that, you baka? Into the air. You were supposed to say, stop right there, or take 1 step and you're dead, not, do you have a dick? The figure appeared truly perplexed as it blinked. Did I say something wrong? It's okay if you don't have anything between your legs, you know. Ichigo snarled. He was now very angry. He pointed to the pale figure with his Zanpakuto and asked, What's your name? I want to know whose ass I'm about to kick first. Sai questioned, pointing to himself. Who, me? My name is Sai. It's nice to meet you. Ichigo smiled and asked, Sai, huh? His eyes widened in shock as he raised his blade, forced to block Sasuke's attack as he slashed at him with both of his swords. Well, I'm Kurosaki Ichigo, it's... Ichigo said, This is... With a tone of surprise. You're channeling lightning through your sword. This is surprising, Sasuke said peacefully. You shouldn't have been able to block my swords with a normal weapon. As his blade fought Sasuke's, Ichigo asked, And since when did you assume that this was a normal weapon? With a composed expression, Sasuke asked, What's your real name, intruder? Shay. Ichigo squinted while he studied Sasuke. How obnoxious. This guy reminds me of Uryu. I've been using my real name this whole time. After pushing Ichigo back an inch, Sasuke said, Well, I suppose I should introduce myself. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. If your group is going to fight, then my team and I are going to have to take you 3 out. Ichigo smiled as he used his sword to push Sasuke away. He tucked his Zanpakuto between his arms and said, It ain't gonna be that easy, baka. His eyes turned blue. White as his Zanpakuto started to glow. Protect, Zanjetsu. The shinobi world, Konoha. Ichigo's eyes turned blue. White as his Zanpakuto started to glow while he tucked him between his arms. Sakura wiped the perspiration from her forehead with her arm without realizing it as she looked at Ichigo in confusion. What's this sensation I'm experiencing? She pondered quietly. As Ichigo slashed out at Sasuke with his Zanpakuto, his eyes narrowed and the air itself seemed to scream. Protect, Zanjetsu. Ichigo burst out. Thud. Sasuke narrowly avoided the near, fatal attack as he leapt out of the dust cloud that pervaded the atmosphere. With a startled expression on his face, he looked up and used his finger to wipe a small drop of blood from his forehead. Sasuke gazed intently at Ichigo when he abruptly noticed Ichigo's changed sword, much to his surprise as well as Sakura's in size. Ichigo's sword now had a sleek black blade with a silver edge, like an enormous kyber knife. The entire sword was nearly as tall as Ichigo himself, and it lacked a tsuba or hilt except for a cloth wrapped tang that Ichigo gripped. Something churned inside Sasuke, causing him to grimace a little. His onyx eyes turned red as 3 spinning tomos appeared in them, and he suddenly widened them as he stared at Ichigo. Something is definitely wrong here. Sharingan. I am possible. Unconsciously taking a step back, Sasuke gazed at Ichigo with a look of complete horror and incredulity. This guy and his two friends are already at a cage level, and they are somehow suppressing the majority of their powers. No, that only applies to the woman. These two men are easily on par with a Biju. Ichigo straightened up and placed the Zangetsu blade on Sasuke's shoulder after observing the shocked look on his face. You scared? He inquired nonchalantly. Well, you should be, because I'm going to kick all of your asses. Ichigo then accumulated a significant amount of Ryatsu in his blade and used it to strike Sasuke, one of his two teammates. Getsuga Tensho! Ichigo yelled, swinging his blade in their direction. Sasuke and the others watched in disbelief as the intruder's blade tip erupted into a huge crescent-shaped wave of blue energy that raced toward them. They barely managed to avoid the assault, and Sakura let out a cry as the blast struck her, sending her hurtling into a tree. With a smile, Sai said, "So your sword actually does serve a purpose," as he crouching on a tree branch. When Ichigo heard this, his eye twitched, and Naruto approached him and put a hand on his shoulder. His words, "Calm down, Ichigo. Also, watch where you fire those things, will you? If you aim it the wrong way, you could end up eventually destroying Konoha." Ichigo continued to face forward and nodded. He blinked and abruptly stopped speaking when he saw Sasuke's chakra levels suddenly rise. Got it, Menma, my bad. What the hell? His jaw dropped as the dust cloud dissipated as he turned to face Sasuke. Sasuke's hair had grown to waist length in the same style, and he now had dark gray skin with a black 4-point star mark across the bridge of his nose and between his eyes. He now had claw-like nails and strange blue lips, and his irides and sclerae were yellow and black, respectively. But Ichigo was most shocked to see that Sasuke had now developed huge, webbed wings on his back that resembled hands. Ichigo smiled and shut his mouth. Well, I thought that I had seen everything, but this is... Sasuke stepped forward, and Naruto looked at him in disbelief. This is his curse mark's second stage. However, it feels very different from the previous time. It seems as though the curse mark's corrupting influence has vanished. After giving Sasuke a quick glance, Sakura bit her thumb and wiped the small drop of blood off the palm of her right hand. Slamming her hand on the floor, she exclaimed, summoning jutsu. The entire area was engulfed in a massive cloud of smoke. After the smoke subsided, Ichigo noticed Sakura standing next to a gigantic slug that had replaced the smoke. Katsuyu. Sama, please take my friends away from this area and heal them while my teammates and I battle the intruders. Katsuyu exclaimed, understood, as it broke up into hundreds of tiny copies of itself. Sakura reached into her top, took out a small scroll, held it out, and unfolded it. Sakura swiftly performed 3 hand seals, snatched 2 big single-bladed kusarigamas out of the smoke cloud, and held them out beside her. Ready, she said, gazing at Ichigo. Sasuke said, my team and I won't hold back, intruder, while gazing at Ichigo. Ichigo lifted his blade and extended it before him. He yelled, bring it on, Uchiha Sasuke, and charged at Sasuke, his sword out at his side. With the sword in his left hand, Sasuke swung it around and stabbed up, aiming to pierce Ichigo through the chin as he ducked to avoid his slash. Ichigo anticipated this and easily sidestepped it, but his eyes widened slightly in surprise as Sasuke took advantage of the situation to spin around and use both swords to slash at Ichigo's back in a move that was almost like a dance. Ichigo, a little taken aback, thought to himself, this guy is good with swords. Sasuke, anticipating this, merely teleported to Ichigo's side and kicked at him after he swiftly used Flash Step to escape the sword's range. Sasuke used his wings to balance himself in midair and pushed himself off the tree with his legs after Ichigo grabbed his leg and threw him against a tree. He then quickly stabbed him with both swords. Ichigo easily sidestepped the blows, but he winced a little when one of Sasuke's blades cut off a single lock of hair. He sighed inwardly and said, okay, this is getting a little annoying. Ichigo used Flash Step to emerge above Sasuke, slapping his blade aside. He then grabbed the cloth that was fastened to his Zanpakuto and spun his sword above his head. Kama no Getsuga. In order to increase the power of his deadly darts technique, which he had learned from his inner hollow, Ichigo channeled his Ryatsu into his blade rather than using Getsuga Tensho. He threw his Zanpakuto at Sasuke repeatedly, shocking Soifun with the tremendous energy blast that resulted from the impact. Startled by this abrupt maneuver, Ichigo threw his Zanpakuto at Sasuke, yanked it back, and repeated the attack, which he barely avoided. Sasuke looked at his female teammate and exclaimed, Sakura, now. Sakura screamed, Kai, and sealed her hands together. I should go all out right away if this guy can defeat Sasuke-kun with this level of skill. A violet rhombus mark appeared in the center of Sakura's forehead, and Ichigo's expression changed to one of surprise. Sakura's face was then covered in lines as the mark continued to extend and spread. Sakura whispered, "White strength seal," while glaring at Ichigo. "I'm ready now." Sakura leapt into the air and pulled her fist back as she rushed at Ichigo. She yelled, "Shanaru!" as her fist struck Ichigo's location from a moment ago. As the entire area essentially exploded from the force of the punch, Ichigo stumbled and fought to stay upright. "What's up with this girl's strength?" Ichigo exclaimed in a humorous manner as he sped away from Sakura as quickly as he could. "Sweden. Snake's mouth," exclaimed Sakura as he sprinted in Ichigo's direction. Abruptly emerging from the debris next to Sakura, a gigantic water snake resembling a dragon roared toward Ichigo. The enormous water snake rose up and twisted from side to side as it opened its wide mouth to swallow Ichigo, who swore to himself in silence as he cut and sliced the jutsu. Ichigo finally slashed at the dragon after narrowing his eyes and directing his Ryotsu through his blade. His voice was, "Getsuga Tensho," as he cut the snake's mouth. The snake kept charging through the attack, but Ichigo's attack finally overpowered it, and it died down with a roar, exploding and raining the area below. She raised her head and gave him a fierce look. "Precise chakra control, this isn't anything that releasing my yin seal did." With his eyes wide, Sasuke yelled, "Sakura, watch out, behind her." "What?" Sakura asked, looking over her shoulder, but Ichigo interrupted her. What?" Ichigo rested the edge of his blade on the fallen Konoha shinobi's shoulder and gazed down at him. "Dully, just kidding," he said, gazing up at Sasuke. "Now." Sakura came up and attempted an uppercut, but he jumped back away from her as his eyes widened. What the devil? Even though I'm positive I cut her down, she's still standing. Hold on a minute, has she healed from her wounds? However, how is this even possible? Ichigo said, "You're a hard one to take down," while gazing down at her. Sakura looked up at him and explained, "This is the power of my white strength seal. It basically gives me an indestructible body for a brief period of time. All of your attacks are useless as long as this jutsu is activated." "Oh really?" Ichigo said softly. Well then, he raised his blade to unleash a Getsuga Tensho, but instead he turned it around and blocked Sai as he emerged behind him, his foot slamming into Ichigo's blade with the blades flat. Squinting, Sai spun around and locked Ichigo's arm and blade with his legs. He performed a few hand seals and brought his hands together, with his index fingers crossing diagonally to form a X. Futon. Raging wind. Sai's hand produced a strong gust of wind, and Ichigo swore and jerked his hand, positioning his sword as a shield with his brute force. Ichigo's blade flattened out as the gust of wind struck it, and the force of the blow sent him flying into a tree. Ichigo surprised Sai by crouching on the tree trunk and pushing himself off of it with his legs. He then swung his Zanpakuto at him. Ichigo remarked, "That was a good try," as Sai promptly drew his own tip. Less Tonto and stopped his assault. "Come to think of it, I said that I was gonna kick your ass first, didn't I?" "You sure did, dickless pansy," said Sai with a bright smile. Ichigo glared at him, his eyes narrowing. "Why you little," he said, pausing when he saw Sasuke jump into the air. Calling upon jutsu, with his hands extended, Sasuke said while performing a mid-flip. Sasuke looked at Ichigo out of the corner of his eye and landed on a big brown hawk that ed its way into the sky. Using his blade to push Sai out of the way, Ichigo sliced the hawk in half and slashed at the air, blowing the shurikens away towards Sasuke with his sheer brute strength. Sasuke whipped out 10 shurikens from the seal on his arm and threw them at him in quick succession as the hawk screeched and raced towards him. Ichigo instantly turned around and stopped Sai's attack, smiling as his blade brushed Sai's. "How are you, pansy?" "Now, Sai." Ichigo's eyes widened as he looked back up at the other Sasuke, who had vanished into a cloud of smoke. "What the hell?" Ichigo turned around in shock to see Sasuke standing beneath him, swords in hand. Ichigo landed on the ground, alone, and looked around to see what was happening when Sai abruptly withdrew. "This is it, trespasser!" Sakura yelled as she abruptly materialized above him, her kusarigamas rapidly spinning above her head. "Chidori!" Sasuke roared as he ran toward him, grabbing his wrist along the way, and to the surprise of both Soifun and Ichigo, the lightning blue jutsu darkened and turned black. As he gazed at it in disbelief, Naruto thought, "That's Black Chidori." Futon. Serial vacuum waves. Sai exclaimed as he inhaled deeply and exhaled several wind blades that rushed in Ichigo's direction. "Take this!" Sakura slammed her kusarigamas down on Ichigo and yelled. Ichigo closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and raised his Zanpakuto, channeling his Getsuga Tensho into it while looking around. Ichigo opened his eyes and slammed the blade into the ground, encircling himself with a huge blue sphere. Getsuga Domu. What? As the blue sphere of energy repelled the attacks of Sasuke and his two teammates, he exclaimed. This is getting annoying, Ichigo scowled. He dissipated the sphere quickly, teleported to Sakura's side, and slammed the end of Zangetsu's hilt hard into Sakura's back. Sakura's eyes rolled up towards the back of her head as she collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Ichigo took a deep breath and swung his Zanpakuto at Sai, who attempted to attack him with his Tanto. Getsuga Tensho. Sakura. Hey Sai. Ichigo looked at Sasuke out of the corner of his eye and said, so you used that lightning thingy of yours to soften the blow, huh? Sai's eyes widened in shock as he fell to the ground with a large gash across his stomach and chest. Well done. When Soifun noticed the blue sphere of Ryotsu encircling Ichigo, she turned to face Naruto, who was watching the battle calmly with her. Naruto, what was that move that he used just now? It's unlike anything I've ever seen. Oh, that's Getsuga Domu, a defensive move that I helped him develop after he learned to control his Ryotsu, Naruto said from behind his mask. Getsuga no Kama, the dark like move he used a short time ago, was another move he created. In essence, they are all variations of his Getsuga Tensho. Soifun turned back to Ichigo as she watched him knock Sakura and Sai out, saying, I see, he's come a long way in the brief time he's been a Shinigami. That's an impressive form you have there, Sasuke, Ichigo said, casting a quick spin around and slashing at Sasuke, who deflected the blow with his two wings. After glancing at his two unconscious partners, Sasuke sighed and wiped a tiny drop of blood from his forehead before slamming his hand to the ground and performing a few quick hand seals. Summoning Jutsu. A moment later, a giant white snake and two smaller white snakes that were still as tall as the trees replaced the enormous cloud of smoke that had previously filled the air. Sasuke. Sama, the largest snake hissed in an unexpectedly courteous tone as it glanced down at Sasuke, who was standing beside it. Looking up at it, Sasuke said, Aoda, tell the two others to bring Sakura and Sai back to the village. After a moment, the two other snakes nodded and slithered off to fetch Sakura and Sai, while Aoda remained by Sasuke's side, hissing at them with an odd whistling sound. Sasuke angrily spat, you'll pay for hurting my comrades, you bastard, from his mouth. Ichigo shook his head, closed his eyes, and pinched the bridge of his nose. Is there no way I could talk you out of this? Sasuke held out his hand and gestured for Ichigo to come closer, saying, after what you just did, don't give me that pile of crap now. Come on, bring it. Ichigo exclaimed, very well then, if you're going to keep fighting, then I have no choice but to use it, and held his sword out in front of him while he gazed intently at Sasuke. Sasuke gave Ichigo a curious glance while tilting his head, but as he opened his mouth, Ichigo appeared to burst with energy, and Sasuke gazed at him in disbelief. Bankai! Ichigo shouted. Thud! Ichigo was encircled by a column of wind that resembled a miniature tornado, and the whole area appeared to burst in a dazzling blue light. Sasuke exclaimed in complete surprise, W! What is this power? Ichigo was wearing a black long, sleeved ankle-length shiakusho with ragged ends and a red lining that was closed at his chest when the wind column dissipated. He was holding a black dado with a four-pronged crossguard bent out like a manji. Sasuke's eyes narrowed as he gazed at Ichigo. His power has more than 10 times increased, even though I can see that his blade is compressing it. Now, Aoda, Sasuke commanded, lunging toward Ichigo and slashing at him with his flashing swords. Indeed, Sasuke. Sama, Aoda lunged at Ichigo as well, hissing. Shay. Ichigo sighed and slowly lifted his blade into the air, stabbing down with it as Sasuke and Aoda lunged at him. Getsuga Domu. In addition to repelling Sasuke and Aoda, the upgraded Getsuga Domu sent a huge shockwave through Ichigo's surroundings, destroying the ground. Sasuke grimaced as his summon Aoda was forcibly dissipated and he was blown back, crashing through several trees and rocks, and forced out of his curse Mark II state. Damn it. As the three tomos dispersed and transformed into three red intercepting ellipses with a three-bladed shuriken in the center, Sasuke's eyes widened. He teleported from his current location to Ichigo's location, quickly balancing himself in midair. Amaterasu, Sasuke whispered. As Sasuke's left eye started to bleed, Ichigo's eyes widened, and Soifun swore to herself in silence. Damn it, it's Amaterasu, I have to. When a tiny spark of black flame materialized right in front of Ichigo's face, she opened her mouth to warn him, but it was too late. Ichigo surprised Sasuke by smiling, but no matter what he's smiling about, he can't avoid my Amaterasu. Impossible, Sasuke muttered in surprise, how did you? With his blade pressed against the Uchiha's throat, Ichigo smiled from behind Sasuke. It was nothing really, he laughed, adding, my Bankai greatly increases my speed. It would almost seem unreal to you guys. Naruto looked at a startled Soifun. In response, the captain of the 2nd Division nodded. He already knows about the Mangekyo Sharingan and Amaterasu. You don't have to worry about warning him, he said. Sasuke gritted his teeth and narrowed his eyes, saying, you damned fool, don't undervalue the Uchiha or the shinobi of Konoha. Susanoo. A huge reddish, orange skeletal figure appeared around Sasuke, grabbing at Ichigo with 3 of its 4 large skeletal hands, and Ichigo swore and jumped back. The figure was covered in multiple layers of armor that were the same color as the skeletal figure, which resembled the armor of a samurai. The armor also had a mouth, like opening that gave off a beak. Like shape, but more worrisome was the sword covered in Amaterasu flames that formed in the Susanoo's 4th hand. What on earth? As he pushed away all 3 of Susanoo's hands, Ichigo screamed, what is this thing? This is my Susanoo, Sasuke said, his eyes threatening, it's the greatest power of the Mangekyo Sharingan, right now. After sheathing his wakizashi, Sasuke lifted his kodachi into the air, and Susanoo followed suit. Die, he shouted as he swung his sword down at Ichigo. When Ichigo, who had already pushed the other arms away, skillfully deflected the attack with Tensa Zanjetsu before abruptly vanishing and resurfacing behind Sasuke, Sasuke watched in disbelief. Susanoo's arm was cut by Ichigo like a piece of paper, and it broke apart as it hit the ground with a loud thud. While channeling his Getsuga Tensho into the tip of his blade and compressing it, Ichigo quickly spun around and grabbed his Zanpakuto with both hands. He lifted it up and pointed it at Sasuke, narrowing his eyes as his Zanpakuto started to emit a black aura. Yari no Tensho, Ichigo exclaimed as a black-dot red spear-shaped beam emerged from Tensa Zanjetsu's tip. With a bewildered expression on his face, Sasuke gazed ahead at the forest that lay before him as Susanoo scattered, totally destroyed by the assault. Impossible, he muttered. Ichigo calmly declared, it's over, as he slashed Sasuke's right side of the chest. Just as Naruto got close to the Uchiha, Ichigo resealed his Zanpakuto, and Sasuke instantly collapsed to the ground. Sorry about this, Sasuke, but we can't let you continue to fight on like this, Hakafuku. A serene expression spread across Sasuke's face as he gazed at Naruto, his eyes slowly closing. Ichigo added, don't worry, turning to look at a concerned Naruto. It was a non-lethal attack. Thanks, Naruto said, gazing at his fallen comrade. Ichigo put his sealed Zanpakuto away and said, I'm sorry, but I had to knock out your friends. As he continued to stare at Sasuke, Naruto waved this off. It wasn't your fault, Ichigo, so it's no big deal, he said, kneeling beside Sasuke, who was now unconscious. Let me just heal him really quick, Naruto said, covering his unconscious companion with his hands. 2 or 3 minutes later, Naruto got up and gestured for Ichigo and Soifun to follow him. However, just as they were ready to take off, Naruto stopped suddenly and gestured for his 2 allies to follow suit. This chakra, it's... Ichigo added, I can sense them as well, gazing off into the direction from which the chakra sources were emanating. It's more of your friends, isn't it? Yay, Naruto nodded. Ichigo sighed and said, well, I really don't want to knock any more of your friends up. What are we going to do about them? Naruto said, we don't have any more time to waste, so let's withdraw. But as soon as he finished speaking, the shinobis showed up. Naruto squinted as he observed the group. Kakashi. Sensei, Asuma. Sensei, Kurenai. Sensei, super bushy brows. Sensei, Arrow. Sennin. You guys need to stand down, said Kakashi, stepping forward and pointing his kunai at the group. Don't let us make you do that, he said, raising his headband to reveal his Sharingan. This is when Soifun intervened, saying, we don't have any more time to deal with the likes of you guys, so. Jiraiya rubbed the back of his head and sighed, it's pointless to try that in front of me, Sway. Fung. You can drop the royal family charade now. Very well then, Soifun sighed and pulled down her hood, removing her mask as well. Ichigo appeared surprised by this, but Naruto had anticipated something similar to occur. She hasn't aged even after 10 years, Kakashi's eyes widened in shock at her face. So you actually figured it out, Jiraiya-chan, Soifin said mockingly, staring at Jiraiya with a hard look in her eyes. The shinobi world, Konoha. Soifin turned to face her two former acquaintances and said, well Jiraiya-chan, I'm honestly surprised to see that you only came with Kakashi-chan and a few other small fries this time around. These small fries are more than enough to take you down, Sui. Feng, Jiraiya said with a smug sneer. I would have thought that you would have known better than that after I kicked you and the other two Sanin's asses the last time we crossed paths, but it seems that some people will never learn, Soifin said, squinting her eyes at this and then grinning. Ichigo turned to Naruto and blinked, saying, wait, am I missing something here? Soifin had crossed paths with the three legendary Sanin, including Jiraiya, over 20 years ago, and had also fought Kakashi around 10 years ago, softly stated Naruto. Naturally, Soifin kicked their asses when she fought them, but because they started the battle in order to arrest her and were not her targets at the time, and since she is forbidden to kill humans needlessly, even those who are shinobi, she had to spare them. I see, Ichigo said, turning back to Jiraiya and the others. Sui. Feng. You're wanted for the assassinations of several high-ranking shinobi throughout the hidden villages, including at least 3 cages. You've also been placed on the bingo book of every nation, even those outside of the allied lands, Kakashi said as he stepped forward, the shinobi that all shinobis fear. You have a lot of nerve showing up here in Konoha, Asuma snarled, giving Soifin a fierce look. And you guys have a lot of nerve for trying to confront me at your current levels, Soifin shot Asuma a menacing smile. We'll find a way to defeat you and your team if that's what it takes to stop you from harming Konoha, Jiraiya said with a smile. Guy said, Sui. Feng, you're ready to lose, and assumed his fighting stance. As she got ready to fight, Soifin cracked her knuckles and stabbed her Zanpakuto into the ground after unsheathing it. I'd like to see you try. Bakudo number 1. Sigh, Naruto Flash said blankly as he moved between the two groups, holding his right fist in front of the shinobi, which was closed except for his index and middle fingers, just as Soifin was finishing her sentence. When an unseen force abruptly restrained Jiraiya and the other, their eyes widened in shock and they fell to the ground. What is this? As he attempted to break free from the imperceptible restraints, Kakashi cried out. Naruto introduced himself and said, my name is Menma. I apologize for my colleague's rudeness, but she gets a little cocky when she talks to other shinobis. We have no intention of laying a finger on Konoha, but we're on a mission of our own and have no time for any delays, so as long as you stay out of our way we'll leave you in the village in peace, Naruto said, ignoring the irate look Soifin was giving him. Now, please pardon us. Naruto said, it's time to go, turning to face Ichigo and Soifin. The Jiraiya and the others were then restrained as Naruto and the others flashed away. After the three of them broke through an unguarded section of Konoha's wall a few minutes later, Naruto snapped his fingers, releasing the Kido and releasing Jiraiya and the others as they looked back at the location where they had left them bound. Soifin said, now, on to Kanabi Bridge, and the group headed straight for it. The land of grass, Kanabi Bridge, after a day. At last, Naruto and the others reached Kanabi Bridge, a big white and red stone bridge with an arch on the bottom, where Hitsugaya and Renji had already arrived some time before and were waiting for Naruto and his group. Naruto remarked, wow, you guys got here early, as the group came to a halt in front of the two. The two Jinchurikis from the hidden cloud village are already within the confines of the village, and the only Jinchuriki that gave us any trouble was the missing Nin Utakata, the Jinchuriki of the Rokubi. At this point, Soifin moved forward and said, so, where is he now? A small clan of shinobis owed Utakata a favor, so he's currently staying with them at their main stronghold, he said. It's not that far from the bridge, so Abarai and I came here right after we were done with him. Naruto looked up at the sky and sighed, I see. Are they all safe? Hitsugaya gave a nod. Other than the Sanbi Jinchuriki, the others are out of danger for the moment. Naruto remarked, and we'll deal with that problem soon enough. So, what should we do next? Ichigo inquired. The intel we received from my contacts in Konoha points to the fact that the Akatsuki plans to capture the Ichibi Jinchuriki named Gaara, the fifth and current Kazekage, Soifin said, tapping the hilt of her Zanpakuto as she considered this. Ichigo appeared taken aback by this. Really? Did you not tell me about this Gaara person, Naruto? After Naruto said, yes I did. If you need a refresher, he's a fellow Jinchuriki, and he's around my age, Soifin rejoined the discussion. In addition, because a cage rarely leaves their village in times of peace, the Akatsuki's only option would be to infiltrate the hidden sand village and capture him there. Hitsugaya, Renji, and Ichigo all had a startled expression on their faces. Would the Akatsuki really have the nerve to attack one of the 5 great shinobi villages? Renji inquired. I suppose we'll find out when we get there, Naruto sighed. Naruto Flash stepped aside, signaling the others to follow, and the group followed, making their way to the hidden sand village. Konoha, the shinobi world, the Hokage's office. Tsunade was being told by Sasuke and the other members of Team Kakashi, Team Asuma, Team Kurenai, and Team Guy what had just transpired and how Soifun and her group had given them their asses. As she considered what Sasuke had just said, Tsunade folded her hands and put her chin on them. So let me clarify. Sway. Feng arrived in Konoha with 2 teammates, if that's what they are, and defeated the 9 of you. He looks at teams Asuma, Kurenai, and Guy. While one of her teammates defeated your team, she looks at Team Kakashi. With hardly any effort at all. Sasuke nodded. That's right, he said, his voice tinged with rage, but not so much because he had lost to this Ichigo guy as because his friends had been harmed and he was powerless to stop it at the moment. Tsunade narrowed her eyes. Kurosaki Ichigo, forget about Shikamaru and the others, for heaven's sake, forget about Sway. Feng coming back, but defeating Sasuke, Sakura, and Sai all at once without even getting a scratch on himself, despite Sasuke's limitations? That's impossible. And then there's this character from Menma. We have no idea what he's capable of, and he's supposedly on par with Ichigo. Just what are you up to now, Sway? Feng. May I ask you a question that has been on my mind recently? Sasuke inquired. Tsunade looked up at the young Uchiha and put her thoughts aside, saying, go ahead. Who exactly is this Sway? Feng individual. I'm positive I've heard her name before, but that's all I know, he said. I forgot that you and Neji just became Jonin a few weeks ago, Asuma said with a sly smile while leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. You wouldn't have asked that question otherwise. Tsunade held up her hand to stop Sasuke as he was about to respond, saying, in any case, Sway. Feng reappearing in Konoha is a possible threat to us, so I think it might be a good time to answer your question, Sasuke. Sway. Feng is known as the shinobi that all shinobis fear. Everyone that is at least a Jonin rank has heard of her at some point in their lives, the Hokage said after taking a deep breath. The first crucial fact you should be aware of is that Sway. Feng's beginnings are entirely unknown. We've been looking for her for a long time, but nobody really knows who she is or where she's from. Has anyone outside of Konoha even tried to find out what her origins are? Shikamaru asked, raising an eyebrow. Countless investigations on Sway Feng have been conducted by the 5 great shinobi nations to this very day, Kurenai said, taking Tsunade's place to respond to Shikamaru's question. In fact, it's the only time that the 5 great shinobi villages will actually cooperate on something on a regular basis, she said. But we've always failed to produce anything. There we go. Tsunade scowled and regained everyone's attention by loudly cracking her knuckles. Anyway, as I was saying, what we do know is that the first accounts regarding Sway Feng come from before the founding of the shinobi villages, she said, turning to face Sasuke. This shocked Sasuke and his peers. So, is this Sway Feng Personai immortal? Hinata timidly questioned Shikamaru from behind. Tsunade sighed and shook her head slowly, saying, I wish I knew, Hinata, I wish I knew. Sway Feng has not only lived for an extraordinary long time, but she is, as you. Tsunade nodded at Sasuke. And some of the other members of the Konoha 12 have discovered, unbelievably skilled, she added after a brief period of silence. With her mastery of stealth and assassination techniques, her arsenal of unusual jutsus, her overwhelming power, and her speed, taijutsu, and kenjutsu skills, she is far more skilled than the average shinobi. As a result, most inexperienced shinobi would be dead before they or their comrades even realized she was there. When Hinata and the other fighters remembered how easily Soifun had eliminated them, they bowed their heads in shame. However, despite her abilities, Sway Feng has killed a lot fewer people than some may believe. She will only murder those she frequently refers to as her targets, indicating that she is most likely following orders from a higher authority, though it is unclear exactly who that individual or group might be. Sakura caught her master's attention by raising her hand halfway through, saying, Tsunade. Sama, if it's okay with you, may I ask who this Sway Feng person has killed so far? It's okay, Sakura, Tsunade said, nodding. Uchiha Tajima, who led the Uchiha clan prior to Uchiha Madara, was among Sway Feng's earliest known victims. He was also the father of Madara and his brother Izuna. According to legend, Madara was able to awaken his Mangekyo Sharingan because he saw his father die at the hands of Sway Feng. Remembering what Itachi had told him about Madara just before the latter's death, Sasuke narrowed his eyes at the mention of Madara. As she considered some additional Sui Feng victims, Tsunade rubbed her chin and said, among her other known victims were the first Tsuchikage, the second Kazekage, the third Mizukage, the Gold and Silver Brothers of the Hidden Cloud, and at least 3 members of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the Hidden Mist's strongest generation, among others. Sakura's eyes went wide with surprise. No way, 3 cages? It's surprising, isn't it? Tsunade nodded. In addition, she managed to defeat the 3 legendary Sannin, which I refer to as Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and myself. She battled us all at once, but even then, as much as I hate to say it, we couldn't compete with her. She also defeated 2 of the 5 current cages, Onoki and Kakashi, as well as a number of other well-known ninjas by herself, though those ninjas were all spared because they weren't Sui Feng's targets at the time. Tsunade narrowed her eyes and said, the thing that I found unusual is that Sui Feng is now a part of a team as she has always fought alone all this time. You must proceed with caution if you should encounter them again. If these teammates of hers are even stronger than Sui Feng, then the situation is even more grim than it had ever been. Everyone in the room, with the exception of the elders of the Konoha 12, looked completely shocked by this. At this moment, Jiraiya came in through the window and looked around the room before crouching on the floor. It's even worse than that, Tsunade, he said immediately. Staring at Jiraiya, Kakashi narrowed his eyes and said, Jiraiya-sama, what do you mean? My spies in the Land of Grass have just reported that there are 2 more unidentified shinobi that have rendezvoused with Sui Feng and her team near Kanabi Bridge. Does this imply that we now have to contend with 5 shinobi, including this Sui Feng? Sai inquired. With a grim expression on his face, Jiraiya turned to face Tsunade and nodded, acknowledging Sai's rhetorical question. You're right. So, Tsunade, he said. Now what? Sasuke inquired, inadvertently completing Jiraiya's statement. Tsunade closed her eyes and sighed, saying, I'm not sure. However, it doesn't alter the necessity of stopping her. At this, Kakashi's eyes narrowed. Does she? What if this Menma individual was being honest and didn't intend to hurt Konoha? As he felt a sinking sensation in his stomach, he thought to himself. The captain of the 2nd Division looked to her left, then to her right as Soifan and her group got closer to the hidden sand village. Gazing at the village in front of them, she thought to herself, we're finally here. Soifan skidded to a stop and held up her hand to tell the others to do the same. Naruto approached her and tapped her shoulder in confusion. He said, what are you talking about, Soifan? In a perplexed tone. We're not even in the outskirts of the village. We still have at least half an hour to go. Hitsugaya looked at the desert they were in and scowled. Looking at the far-off village, he said, can't you sense them, Uzumaki? Taiko? Naruto was taken aback when he realized what the captain of the 10th Division was discussing. He muttered angrily, damn it. So they've already captured Gaara. Naruto gripped his Zanpakuto's hilt tightly and glared at the 2 far-off figures who were slowly approaching the group. Unforgivable, I'll fucking beat the crap out of those 2, he said. An average height, long-haired man with a half ponytail and slanted blue eyes narrowed his eyes when he saw a group of masked people in the distance. With caution, he said, Sasori no Dana, while continuing to watch the group. Yay, I know, his partner said in a raspy, low voice. In contrast to his partner, he was a short, stooped man with black eyes and a tattered mask covering his mouth. Stay on guard, Deidara. I don't understand why I can't sense any chakra from any of them, but it's obvious that they're extremely powerful. Deidara said, this is a good opportunity to test my artistic skills, as he rubbed his chin and gazed thoughtfully ahead of them. A few seconds later, he turned to look at the vanquished Gaara, unconscious and ensnared in the tail of Deidara's enormous clay bird. That Ichibi's Jinchuriki was a tough one, but I didn't have a chance to show off as much of my artistic skills as I would have liked to have. Sasori gave a frustrated growl. He commanded, shut up, as the group in front of them approached. Get ready. They're here. Sasori said, who might you 5 be? In a courteous but irritated tone. I wasn't informed that Konoha would already be sending reinforcements over to rescue the Jinchuriki. Soifan said, you weren't informed, so you did have a spy in the hidden sand village after all, most likely that sleeper cell guy within the council. This appeared to surprise Sasori, but his face stayed expressionless. How did she find out about Yura? He pondered. So, I'm guessing that you kids are here to rescue the Jinchuriki. Well, I'm afraid that that's impossible. Naruto snarled behind his mask, pulled out his Zanpakuto, drove the blade into the ground, and faced Soifan. There's no rules against killing these guys, right? Gazing at the 2 figures, Soifin smiled from behind her mask. Since we're here to kill them. No, there isn't. Naruto turned to the two Akatsuki members and said, wait, scratch that, I'm not gonna just kill them, I'm gonna beat the living shit out of them, and then I'll kill them. Deidara's eyes narrowed. Oh? The blonde turned to face his partner, who smirked as he repeatedly opened and closed his single hand. Did you hear that? Sasori no Dana. This masked artless kid thinks that he can take us on. Come. Well then, let's see if you have what it takes, kid. The Sasori growled, be careful, Deidara, what did I tell you before? Ha! The blonde Akatsuki member sneered. Deidara stuffed his hand into his side pouches and fed some explosive clay into his second mouth, the mouth on the palm of his hand. Now, he smiled at Naruto and leapt on his enormous clay bird, surprising Naruto and the others by taking his hand out of his pouch. Well, Deidara gazed down at his hand, which spat out a bunch of clay that had been chewed up. In a matter of seconds, the blonde Akatsuki member closed his hand and shaped the lump of clay into 5 tiny, 4-winged birds. Let's get going, shall we? Behold, my art. Deidara threw the 5 clay birds into the air and sealed them with his only hand, engulfing them in a thick cloud of smoke. Naruto and the others noticed that the 5 tiny clay objects had transformed into 5 slender birds after the smoke cleared. It was clear that the birds were made for speed rather than destructive power. Renji shifted his feet and narrowed his eyes before preparing to attack Deidara by slowly pulling his Zanpakuto from its sheath. Naruto. Yay! Naruto glanced at Soifin and motioned for her and the others, except for Renji, to focus on him. He pulled his Zanpakuto off the ground and said, Renji and I will handle the blondie. You, Ichigo, and Hitsugaya handle Puppet Boy over there. Naruto smiled at Sasori from behind his mask as he appeared shocked by this. Turning back to Deidara, he appeared in front of the shocked Akatsuki member and slashed at him, seemingly vanishing as he used Flash Step. Yay, we know that you're inside a puppet and have many more besides that, don't be so surprised. Deidara leaned back, just managing to dodge the blade as it went a millimeter over his nose. Che, he's quick. He looked at his clay birds, beckoned to them with his middle and index fingers, then backflipped his way to the ground below. The enormous bird that was carrying Gaara abruptly leapt into the air, racing off with the barely alive K's cage and coming to a stop more than 100 yards from the group's location while staying in midair. The 5 clay birds sped surprisingly fast toward Naruto, who quickly spun around. The blonde Shinigami twisted over and slammed his Zanpakuto down on one of them, immediately avoiding the explosive bird's reach with a flash step. Swelling up as if they were going to burst, the other 4 birds turned around and raced in Naruto's direction before abruptly bending and racing in Renji's direction. Renji! Get out of there, Naruto screamed in a panic. Renji squatted in the air, using his legs to propel himself backwards because he didn't have time to flash step away, and his eyes widened in shock. The vice captain was sent flying more than 20 feet backwards by the force of the explosion, but it was still too big, and he skidded to a stop. Shay! Naruto exclaimed as he strode to Deidara's side and swung his Zanpakuto at him with ferocious force once more. Naruto roared, Die, you piece of shit, and swung his sword at him. I'm taking Gaara back no matter what. Deidara laughed and raised his hand in a hand seal, his eyes widening with a trace of irritation. Don't underestimate me, kid. A massive mass of clay encased and trapped Naruto's sword as it sliced through the blonde Akatsuki member, causing his eyes to widen. Ha 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 ha. Deidara let out a wild laugh. Behold my art, Katsu. Thud. Returning to the battleground, Renji watched in shock as Deidara's clay clone exploded, Naruto beside it. Naruto. Stop freaking out, Renji. When Renji noticed Naruto standing beside him, his head jerked to the right. Thank goodness, for a moment I thought that bastard got you. Naruto scowled at Deidara and grimaced. I'm attacking him blindly right now, and I'll never be able to defeat him like that, so I need to calm down. Actually, I could do this quite easily, but it's still not the right way to go about it. Naruto, calm down. After taking a deep breath, Naruto raised his hand waist length and pointed a finger at Deidara as he flash stepped to his blind spot. Hado number 1. Show. It was already too late when Deidara turned around. It felt like a really hard kick to the chest as an unseen force slammed into him, sending him flying more than 10 feet. What is this type of ninjutsu? The bewildered blonde Akatsuki member pondered. I'm getting annoyed with this little masked guy. Huh? Deidara held up his hand and used his middle and index fingers to beckon the ground. Behind Naruto, a large clay centipede that was more than 15 feet long leapt out of the ground, encircling and securing him in its grip. Naruto sighed in frustration and gave his binds a slight tug. So, is this supposed to keep me bound or something? Deidara made a hand seal with his single hand and smiled broadly. No, it's supposed to do this, Katsu. When Naruto and the clay centipede exploded, sending huge pieces of debris flying in all directions, Renji's eyes widened in shock. Naruto, the vice captain cried. A voice behind him reprimanded, I thought I already told to stop freaking out like that, tattoo. Brows. Renji turned to see Naruto standing quietly behind him with a level expression on his face. Naruto, he stumbled out. Naruto said, it's called a flash step, Baka, in a tone that was deadpan. Naruto frowned as he looked down at his burned sleeve. I just broke free and Flash stepped away at the moment of the explosion. It might not seem like it, but Shunpo is actually a little bit faster than Ninja's body flicker jutsu. Just a little bit. The fact that Naruto managed to avoid the explosion astounded Deidara. The Akatsuki member reached into his side pouch and prepared some explosive clay for another attempt at the two Shinigamis. Shay. So you're fast too, huh? This is getting even more annoying, he said. Now, let's see if this works. Deidara studied Naruto and Renji, slowly withdrawing his hand and squinting his eyes. Why don't we go with the C2 dragon? With Soifun, Ichigo, and Hitsugaya. Sasori's attack was easily sidestepped by Soifun, whose enormous, scorpion-like tail dug into the sandy ground below. She smiled and said, nice try, puppet boy. Your attacks are too slow. Why don't you try attacking me with your real self? Withdrawing his tail, Sasori snarled and squinted his bloodshot eyes at the Soifun, Ichigo, and Hitsugaya. I see, his tail abruptly snapped to the right at Hitsugaya, who merely used his unsheathed Zanpakuto to block the attack. The scorpion-like tail then curved in Ichigo's direction. He ducked under the attack and used his Zanpakuto to stab down at the tail, breaking it with little effort. Shay, Sasori sneered. So all three of you are extremely skilled, I see. Then let's see if you can dodge this. The stooped Akatsuki member pulled his ragged mask away from his mouth, exposing his mouth, which exploded, launching a volley of needles at the three Shinigamis. Holding his Zanpakuto above his head, Hitsugaya squinted. Sit upon the frosted heavens, Hiranmaru. As it struck the flurry of needles, a gigantic dragon of ice roared out from the tip of the blade, freezing and stopping each and every one of them. Ichigo and the others watched in mild surprise as the puppet straightened up, the cloak tearing in half to reveal a giant red mask attached to his mask, while Sasori scoffed as his attack was halted. What's that thing? Ichigo asked rhetorically, preparing for an impending attack by extending his Zanpakuto. Even Soifun was shocked when the enormous mask abruptly broke into thousands of tiny fragments. Slowly, a cloaked figure of average height with a black sack over his head stepped out of the puppet's now empty shell. He straightened up and unmasked himself, revealing a red-haired man who appeared to be in his mid-20s with brown eyes that had a lifeless expression in them. This caused Soifun to smile. So you've finally shown yourself, Sasori of the Red Sand. Sasori slowly retrieved a scroll from inside his cloak, unfolded it, and held it out in front of him. On the scroll, the number 3 was written. Hitsugaya gripped his sword tighter and narrowed his eyes. 3. Sasori said, this is my favorite puppet, as the scroll's edges and the number 3 started to glow purple. A cloud of smoke poured out of the scroll, enveloping the red-haired Akatsuki member. Consider yourselves lucky that I deemed you three dangerous enough to use this on. It took me quite a while to catch this puppet, but then again, that's why he's my favorite. Sasori appeared as a dark blue, purple-haired figure with amber eyes and dark skin after the smoke cleared. Wearing a black cloak with a high fur collar, it glared at the three Shinigamis, warning them that this was a puppet on a different league entirely from the one Sasori had been hiding in. Sasori suddenly gave the three a mocking smile, which seemed out of character for someone with a dead personality like himself. Behold, the third cage. He said, I hope that you three are ready, as his fingers abruptly became a jumble of motions. A lot of gray sand spilled out of the puppet's mouth as its jaw slammed open. This isn't going to be anything like the last puppet that you guys fought against. If you don't come at me seriously, you'll die and end up as part of my collection. Soifun shifted her feet, getting ready, and squinted her eyes while smiling menacingly. What a joke, he's underestimating us. Deidara's jaw tightened in exasperation as he hit the ground with a loud thud. He picked himself up off the ground and used his teeth to remove the ragged cloak that Naruto's Kido spell had destroyed, which he was still certain was some kind of strange but incredibly strong ninjutsu. These guys, the blonde Akatsuki member glared at Naruto and Renji, narrowing his eyes. Despite their strength, their attacks and movements lack artistic flair. What a disgrace. He briefly looked away from the two Shinigamis to look at his C2 dragon, which had been destroyed by the Renji's Keto spell. It appears that I might actually need to use it after all. So, let's take a look here. As he took the last fistful of clay that was left and fed it to his second mouth on the palm of his hand, he looked down at his side pouch and scoffed to himself in silence. All I have left is enough clay for one final assault. I must make this matter. Seeing Deidara frowning while glancing down at his side pouch, Naruto taunted, almost out of your precious clay? It must suck to know that the reason that you're about to lose is because you're out of clay. Deidara's one visible eye was filled with hatred as he glared at Naruto, growling. He spat angrily, shut up, you stupid masked brat. You'll regret saying that to me, Deidara said, drawing a hand from his side pouch and shaping the chewed clay into 10 tiny birds, 3 on each side, each with 6 wings. These are the swiftest birds I own. They can't avoid these at all, even with their unexpected speed. Deidara created a hand seal with his hand and chuckled the birds at Naruto and Renji, bringing them to life with a puff of smoke. His laughter was wild. Let's see you guys dodge this, he exclaimed. Flash stepping back a few feet, Naruto and Renji narrowly avoided the 10 incredibly fast birds, looking shocked. These birds. In his imagination, Naruto yelled. Compared to the first ones he threw at us, they are even faster. With these cloaks limiting our abilities, we won't be able to outrun them for very long, even with our flash step, especially Renji. Renji will only be there for a few minutes at most, even if he is an expert Shunpo user. By then, I must tend to them. Naruto turned and nodded to Renji. Renji nodded back, then threw his blade out and leapt into the air, spinning around and staying balanced in midair to dodge a flying bird. Renji yelled, roar, Zabumaru, and swung his newly transformed Zanpakuto at the gullible bird. Boom! Deidara was startled by the explosion and turned her head to look in Renji's direction. With a startled yet hysterical tone, he cried, W. What the hell is that weapon? Just what the hell are you guys? Renji landed on the ground and swung his 6-part segmented sword at the blonde Akatsuki member, glaring at him. It doesn't matter if I explained it to you or not, because it's all over for you, you blonde baka. Deidara was able to avoid the relatively moderate speed attack with ease, but as he spun around in midair, his eyes widened in surprise when he saw Naruto use a series of high-speed flash steps to destroy the other 9 birds. He was unaware that Naruto had increased his speed to the point where he could easily outrun the birds by using Kurama's Ryotsu. Deidara landed on the ground and spat at it, his eyes wide with rage and hatred. Che! He exclaimed. He shouted, let's see if you can stop this, and sped in the direction of his enormous bird, which was holding a still, unconscious Gaara hostage. But before he could get to the bird, Naruto materialized and kicked him to the ground below. Naruto landed on the ground beside the blonde Akatsuki member and yelled, too slow, Deidara. It's over, you have nowhere else to run, Deidara. Deidara narrowed his eyes and swallowed the fragment of clay he had gotten his hands on before Naruto kicked him. To Naruto's surprise, Deidara smiled and gulped down the clay, remaining motionless as his body started to swell. With a curious expression on his face, Renji appeared beside Naruto and turned to face Deidara. Renji turned to Naruto and said, W. What the hell's going on over here? It beats me, Naruto said in a level voice. It's a bomb, baka. Kurama yelled in a reprimanding voice. He's about to blow himself up. Get out of here now. This caused Naruto's eyes to widen, and Deidara's smile to widen even more as his body swelled up to the size of a gigantic black blob. Look at my masterpiece, he exclaimed with delight. Oh no. Naruto spun around on his heel and caught a startled Renji by the cloak collar. When Deidara saw this, his eyes grew wide with rage. Oh no, you don't, he screamed. Naruto grimaced and lowered himself a little, preparing to flash step away. Katsu. Just 1 millisecond before Deidara exploded, Naruto flashed away, sending huge pieces of rock flying in all directions. Naruto sighed, phew, as he and Renji emerged more than 50 feet from the blast. That was a close one. Renji collapsed to the ground, gasping for air and his eyes wide. Then he took another deep breath. Thanks a lot, Naruto, he said. I owe you one. Suddenly, Naruto's head turned to face the direction Soifun and the others were going. Now all that's left is that guy. Out of the corner of Sasori's eye, he saw Deidara explode, and he narrowed his eyes. Che. So that Baka was able to get away by diverting attention with a self-destructing clone. Huh? As he considered his next move, Sasori repeatedly opened and closed his hand while he narrowed his eyes and stared at the 3 Shinigamis. Even though iron sand caused a lot of trouble, Soifun, Ichigo, and Hitsugaya had been able to deal with the third Kage's puppet. Sasori had even wound Ichigo and the other two using the Jishin Iron Sand World method, but Soifun had effortlessly removed the poison in an unidentified manner. The hardened sand could even form itself into a variety of weapons. Sasori was forced to reveal his most potent puppet, himself, after Hitsugaya's Hiranmaru frozen his entire supply of iron sand, forcing him into a corner. Although his only weakness was the core in his chest that housed his beating heart, he admitted that he had made himself into a puppet. Sasori's once great puppet army of 100 puppets was reduced to just 5 puppets due to the combined power of Ichigo's Getsuga Tensho and Hitsugaya's Hiranmaru, despite the fact that he had revealed his red secret jutsu, performance of 100 puppets. Using a quick flash step, Soifun emerged behind a still puppet brandishing a gigantic axe. She killed it by locking its head between her legs, snapping it off, and shattering its arms into pieces. Ichigo used both hands to swing his sword at 2 more puppets, causing the tip of his weapon to slash out in a huge blue crescent shape that obliterated the 2 puppets. In contrast, Hitsugaya decided to quickly freeze the last puppet that was still alive from the neck down by flicking the tip of his blade at it as it charged at him. The puppet's head was the only part that remained intact as it fell to the ground below and smashed into pieces. Soifun sheathed her Zanpakuto and looked at Sasori, who was a little taken aback. "There's nothing else that you can use, Sasori," she replied. She waved her hand at him, saying, "I would tell you to stand down, but I'll kill you even if you do. Come on. I'll allow you to try one last pathetic attempt at trying to stop even one of us." As a gentle wind blew through the room, Sasori bowed his head and stayed motionless. His fingers jerked, and 2 puppets, a male and a female, judging by their appearance, that were at least 3 feet from Soifun suddenly came to life and raced in Soifun's direction with startling speed. Soifun's eyes widened at this, but she was unable to avoid the attack in time due to her arrogance and her belief that none of the puppets were sufficiently intact to attack. She had no choice but to wait for the 2 blades to pierce her chest. Soifun. When Naruto noticed this, however, he instantly activated Kurama's shroud, sped across the area in an instant, and then slammed his foot into Sasori's back, sending him hurtling across the area. Sasori struck Soifun, sending her flying a few feet back, but he took the blow instead, and he stood still with both swords protruding from his chest and his head still bowed. Soifun jumped to her feet and looked at Sasori in disbelief. The 2 blades protruding from his chest had succeeded in piercing his core, the only human part of his body, and the 2 puppets were draped around him as though they were embracing him. "He nearly killed me," Soifun thought to herself in disbelief. "I could have actually died if it weren't for Naruto." When Soifun said, "I guess that's I owe you one again, Naruto waved him away. Naruto said, "Just try to be a little less arrogant from now on. Your cockiness has always been your biggest weakness, Soifun," in a lighthearted but serious tone. "You should really work on that part of you. Especially when it comes to dealing with the shinobi." When they heard Sasori mumbling something, the 5 shinigamis who had just appeared where they were turned to face him. The 2 puppets fell with him as he fell forward. Naruto gazed at the 3 puppet bodies with curiosity and asked, "Come to think of it, do those 2 puppets kind of look like a mom and dad, or is it just me?" "Who knows," Soifun uttered in a weary tone. "Anyways, weren't you supposed to rescue Gaara?" This caused Naruto's eyes to widen, and he then swiftly moved to where Deidara's enormous bird was. Naruto swiftly tore off its head, pulled Gaara from the bird's tangled tail, and used his legs to launch himself off the bird's body just in time to avoid the explosion. The rest of the group materialized around Naruto as he leaned over Gaara's unconscious body and landed safely on the ground. "How is he?" Renji inquired, sounding a little concerned. "He looks really pale." "It's all right," Naruto said. Gaara." 2 figures were sprinting in their direction when Naruto and the other turned around. The person on the left was a man with a painted face and a black, baggy, full bodysuit with a black hood. The woman on the right was wearing a black kimono with short sleeves and a red waistband. She had green eyes and blonde hair pulled back into 4 short ponytails, and she wore black gloves without fingers. When Naruto saw the figures, he was taken aback and silently thanked the stars that he was wearing his Kido mask. He said, "It's all right," before the 2 figures could exchange words. "He's doing fine." Trying not to lose his cool in spite of what he had just said, Naruto covered Gaara with his hands and started to heal him. "Although his wounds appear to be nearly fatal, I still have a lot to learn about medical Kido and other related topics." 10 exhausting minutes later, Naruto pulled his hands away and stood up slowly, letting out a sigh of relief. "He's still unconscious, but he'll be fine. He should wake up within the hour." The two figures smiled at Naruto, both of them sighing with relief. The woman said, "Thank you, stranger," and held out her hand. "My name is Temari, Gaara's sister." "I'm Kankuro," declared the man, Gaara's brother. Naruto nodded and shook Kankuro's and Temari's hands. "I know. I mean, it's nice to meet you too." Kankuro narrowed his eyes at the sight of Sasori's lifeless body as he surveyed the devastated area. So this is what he really looked like. "Menma," Soifin said. She turned to Temari and Kankuro and nodded curtly, saying, "Let's withdraw for now. My apologies, but it's unsafe to stay here, no matter who you two really are." Naruto nodded and took a slow step back. He said, "It was nice to meet you too, once more, farewell." Then Naruto and the others flashed away, leaving nothing but a sliver of wind behind. Unknown place. Later on. 8 figures stood on either finger of a massive humanoid statue that sat in the center of a large, largely deserted cave. A figure wearing a spiraled orange mask said, "So, Sui Feng has returned once again, and with a team of her own no less, is that right?" Deidara confirmed the statement with a nod. "That's right. Sasori no Dana was killed by her and her 4 comrades. How embarrassing, Don't underestimate her," the masked figure cautioned you. "She could easily handle any one of us. Be on guard at all times from now on." "You have to be fucking kidding me," exclaimed a figure with purple eyes and silver hair that was slicked back. "You finally reveal yourself, and you're more of a pussy than any of us." The now exposed Uchiha Madara stated, "No one can defeat Uchiha Madara," with narrowed eyes. "It's just a precaution, especially since we are still without a single Biju thanks to her 2 teammates. Listen well, all of you. As of now, we of the Akatsuki are now Sui Feng's targets." 3 days following the Cage's rescue. Tsunade scowled as she heard her helper Shizune read aloud the report that the Hidden Sand Village had just brought about the Cage Gaara's rescue. The report claimed that Soifin and her group had killed Sasori and allegedly Deidara, 2 Akatsuki members, in the process of saving Gaara. Tsunade's frown deepened as she considered the report after Shizune had finished reading the final sentence. Given that she and her team saved Gaara's life, it's not surprising that Temari and Kankuro didn't try to stop her. They wouldn't have known about the brief battle between us and Sui Feng's team, and even if they had, they wouldn't have been able to identify her. Standing at attention a few feet from her desk, she shifted her attention to Team Kakashi and Team Kurenai, which was temporarily led by Jiraiya because Kurenai had been confirmed pregnant the previous day. She gestured for Sai to come forward, noticing that he was thinking about something. Sai took a step forward and parted his lips. "So Hokage Sama, does this mean that Sui Feng and her team are going to go after the Akatsuki?" The Hokage responded, "It's more than likely," fully aware that word of the Suna incident had already gotten out across Konoha. So, Tsunade gave Kakashi, who had just finished speaking, a look. Kakashi questioned, "What do you plan to do about this, Hokage Sama?" "Well, I sent a request to the other cages a few days ago to request for a 5-cage summit to be held in the Land of Iron to address the issue," stated Tsunade. "The meeting is to take place approximately 10 days after we receive all 5 cages' approval. All we need now is the Hidden Mist's Mizuka Yagura to agree to it." Tsunade went on, glancing around at everyone to see if her explanation had taken hold. "Be warned. Until this meeting has ended, and a decision on how to deal with this situation has been made, you're not to go after Sui Feng or the known members of her team. You are only to engage her or her teammates should you happen to come across them by chance. Understood?" Everyone showed that they understood by nodding. Tsunade nodded too, glancing down at an unrolled scroll on her desk in front of her. "Now, Team Kakashi and Team Kurenai, here is your mission. You 8 are to travel to the Land of Grass and infiltrate a newly discovered underground complex that appears to be one of Orochimaru's active hideouts." This appeared to infuriate both Sakura and Sasuke, as Sakura clenched her fists, knowing all too well that Naruto's absence was due to the snake Sanin. Tsunade went on after a brief pause that gave Team 7 members a chance to collect themselves. "As our evidence suggests that it has also been used not too long ago, there might be something in the hideout this time around. Your main objective is to find as much, if any, intel as possible regarding Orochimaru and the whereabouts of Naruto while capturing or killing Orochimaru if you 8 should happen to cross paths with him during your mission." At nearly the same moment, Sakura and Sasuke said, "We accept this mission," and the other 2 teams quickly followed suit. With a sigh, Kiba assumed his customary relaxed posture, clasping his hands behind his back. "So, another hideout of Orochimaru's to infiltrate, huh? This is gonna be a big pain in the neck." In his typically quiet but dead voice, Shino remarked, "You're beginning to sound like Shikamaru, Kiba." Why is this? It's because Shikamaru always states that everything is a bothersome, and you. Alright already. Kiba snarled in a bitter voice. Just saying that I sounded like Shikamaru would have been enough, Shino. S. So, we have another opportunity to discover Naruto. Kun's location, Hinata said to herself in her mind. No matter what, we'll find you, Naruto.kun. The Shinobi World, the land of grass, after a few more days. Hitsugaya, Ichigo, and Naruto landed on the ground behind a big boulder that was in front of a meadow, crouching next to it. Naruto's group was traveling to the land of grass to infiltrate Orochimaru's hideout and eliminate him after learning of his location from yet another of Soifan's spies, while Soifan and Renji were traveling to the border between the lands of lightning and frost to meet up with one of Soifan's numerous contacts. The mission's purpose? As a former member of the Akatsuki, Orochimaru and his right-hand man, Yakushi Kabuto, who had previously been in contact with the late Sasori, were targeted. When he finally made the decision to let something out of his chest, Ichigo scowled as he gazed up at the gradually darkening afternoon sky and the meadow's grass moving in time with the breeze. So Naruto, he said, how was this Yagura guy in any danger if he was just being controlled by Genjutsu? Pulling his hood over his head even further, Naruto blinked from behind his mask. Silently, the Genjutsu itself wasn't the problem, he answered. The real problem is that the person casting the Genjutsu is the leader of the Akatsuki. Ichigo waited for Naruto to go on, but the blonde Shinigami was too preoccupied with the events of the previous few days to pay attention. The Shinigamis had headed straight for the land of water after defeating Deidara and Sasori. 2 days prior, they had sneaked into the hidden mist village and, without being noticed, freed the Mizukage Yagura, the Sanbis, the Three Tails, Jinchuriki, from a mysterious genjutsu that someone, probably from the Akatsuki, had been using to control the Mizukage, turning him into a ruthless and vicious tyrant. The next day, before any of the hidden mist shinobi could find them, Naruto and his group fled the hidden mist. But before they did, they had heard that Yagura had finally regained consciousness after going unconscious when the jutsu was released, and that he had no recollection of anything that had happened to him since he became the Mizukage. Which encompassed everything he had done that was terrible. The same morning that Naruto and his group departed, he received the information from one of his advisors and promptly resigned from his role as the Mizukage, handing the title over to a young woman named Terumi Mei. Hitsugaya looked at Naruto, who had been running silently through the thick forest that had covered the meadow, as he and his group ran through it. Naruto, there's something that I've wanted to ask you for a while if that's alright with you. What is it? Before posing the query, Hitsugaya was silent for a moment. What did think of your friends back in the Hidden Leaf Village? Ichigo appeared perplexed by this. What do you mean by that, Toshiro? The white-haired captain, I was asking for a gauge on their strength, answered. After pondering this question for a few minutes, Naruto let out a sigh. Well, I can't really say. Soifan defeated most of them before they could use their full power, and Sasuke and Sakura and their new teammate were most definitely holding back their full power in their battle with Ichigo. Most likely to prevent any collateral damage to Konoha. This appeared to surprise Hitsugaya, who turned to look at Ichigo inquiringly. Well, Kurosaki Ichigo? Is this true? Ichigo scowled briefly before responding. Well, to be honest, I expected their attacks to be much stronger than they were. They felt pretty weak to me, especially with that Sasuke guy. I'm guessing that if that Sasuke and I used our full strength, I would have ended up with more than a single strand of my hair cut off, hey. The group reached the hideout, which was situated in the center of a rocky wasteland, a few hours later. Looking around, Naruto turned to Ichigo and gestured for him to remain motionless. You stay here and guard the entrance, Ichigo. Ichigo started to object, but Naruto stopped him with a raised hand. It's obviously going to be a very small tightly packed space, and you definitely can't use your Zanpakuto in either its Shikai or sealed state. Also, someone has to keep that white-skinned piece of shit's other uninvited guests out. Ichigo finally gave in and slapped his forehead while he sighed. Alright, alright. Naruto clapped his hands together and smiled from behind his mask. If it looks like your opponents are stronger than they were last time, you can take off your cloak. Also, I know that you know this, but don't use that form unless you absolutely have to. In other words, don't use that unless you're less than an inch away from death. Ichigo scowled at this warning and nodded. I know. Naruto nodded in return, then turned to touch the secret entrance. Hado number 1. Show. Naruto used his bare hands to tear off enormous chunks of rock, creating a fist-sized hole in the ground that was actually the hidden entrance. Naruto deadpanned, knock knock, to himself. Naruto turned to face Hitsugaya, nodded, and leapt down the hole. landing on the ground below without incident. Hitsugaya said, "Take care of the entrance, Kurosaki Ichigo," and then he also leapt down the hole. Ichigo Flash sighed in exasperation as he stepped on top of the enormous boulder that was resting atop the hideout and took a seat there to wait for the opponents who were coming slowly. Hitsugaya and Naruto looked around the space, which was a long, somewhat slender hallway with several torches pierced into the walls for illumination. Hitsugaya noted, "This corridor seems like it could go on forever." Naruto stood motionless, staring at the floor, and then, after a brief pause, he began to move along the right side of the corridor while tapping his knuckle gently against the wall. He halted and took a step back after a few feet. After giving him a curious look, Hitsugaya's eyes widened in shock as Naruto leaned back, pulled his leg back, and kicked the wall, destroying that section of the wall entirely. Naruto immediately stepped through the hole, leaving Hitsugaya scratching the back of his head in confusion. Naruto, he must really be pissed off right now. Two figures, one with gray hair tied back in a short ponytail and the other with long black hair and deathly white skin, looked up from their positions in a dimly lit room when they heard a distant rumbling sound coming from the opposite side of the hideout. The eyes of the gray-haired figure narrowed behind his round, black-rimmed glasses. "Orochimaru. Sama." "I know," the black-haired figure said, grinning sickly. "It seems that we have guests, Kabuto-kun. I wonder, could it be Sasuke-kun?" Kabuto scowled and closed his eyes, concentrating on the atmosphere and emotion seeping through the walls. This angry feeling certainly does fit him, but can you feel it, Orochimaru? "Sama, the air is getting cold at an extremely fast rate." Orochimaru agreed with his henchman and nodded. "I was also wondering about that as well. It must be a new guest." He rose slowly from his chair and made his way to the room's entrance, smiling eagerly to see who owned the strong energy sources. "Let's go greet them, Kabuto." With a nod, Kabuto got up from his chair and went out the door with his master. "Yes, Orochimaru. Sama." When he and Hitsugaya eventually entered a sizable, empty room supported by 4 enormous stone pillars, Naruto turned to look around. Hitsugaya reached out and grabbed Naruto's shoulder to stop him before he could take another step. "Naruto." Naruto looked back over his shoulder at the young captain and blinked when he understood why he had stopped him. When he turned around and saw 2 figures emerge from the shadows, he felt his blood begin to boil. "They're here," he whispered. As they emerged into the light, the 2 figures, one with long black hair and the other with slightly smaller, gray hair, gave the 2 intruders a smile and showed their faces. The latter said, My, I don't seem to recognize them," as he gazed at the 2 with interest. "Hey," the white man on the left smiled, letting his arms hang sullenly at his sides. "I expected Sasuke-kun and maybe a few of those pesky Konoha shinobis, but it seems that I was mistaken." From behind his mask, Naruto snarled and reached for his Zanpakuto's hilt, pulling it out halfway while unleashing a tremendous amount of Ryotsu that even startled the 2 figures. "Orochimaru, Orochimaru." When Orochimaru heard his name, he arched an eyebrow. "Your presence seems strangely familiar, but I can't recall meeting you, judging by your hostility towards me. Have we perhaps met somewhere?" "Oh." Naruto appeared to find this amusing. "So you can't recall who I am after all? Well, I figured as much, don't worry. It'll become obvious who I am sooner or later." Hitsugaya silently examined Orochimaru, his eyes narrowed. "Thus, this is the monster that caused Uzumaki Naruto's death and nearly turned his friend Sasuke against him in Konoha. His pale skin, his eerie long tongue, and the way he licks his lips in anticipation all indicate that this man is not human at all." The icy silence was abruptly broken when Kabuto said, "So, if I may ask, what are you 2 doing here?" Kabuto turned to his master and frowned. "It's pretty clear that you've come to try and kill Orochimaru. Sama, but... Hold on a second. Orochimaru. Sama. The reports on the strange group of figures that had just recently attacked Konoha." Orochimaru nodded while glaring at the 2 Shinigami with a frustrated look on his face. "It seems like it, so, I take you 2 are part of that group, am I correct?" Hitsugaya tilted his head and smiled oddly at the enemy pair. "Who knows? Since you're going to die here anyways, Orochimaru, I'll show you my face beforehand," Naruto said quietly. The blonde Shinigami reached for his mask and casually pulled back his hood, removing it and undoing the Kido spell that had changed both his hair color and his voice. "Remember it well. The person who's going to kill you," he said. If it weren't for the fact that his only thought was to kill them, Naruto would have loved to treasure the looks on Orochimaru's and Kabuto's faces when they saw his face. There was a hint of horror mixed with the expression of pure shock. It was a face that seemed to have seen a ghost of their past. It was the face of someone who knew that something unavoidable was going to happen, and that they wouldn't benefit from it. With his eyes wide with surprise, Kabuto whispered, "Th. This is impossible, Naruto.kun. Just what the hell is going on here?" Orochimaru's voice was quiet and raspy as he whispered, "T. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki, Uzumaki Naruto," with an odd mixture of surprise and excitement. Naruto said, "Orochimaru, I've come to take your life," as he revealed his Zanpakuto. Naruto raised his Zanpakuto into the air and said, "I'll make sure that you can never hurt Sasuke or Konoha ever again, you white snake bastard." His eyes glowed yellow. White as he was encased in a shroud of glowing Ryotsu. "Open the floodgates, kamikaze." As a massive gust of overwhelming Ryotsu threatened to topple the entire room, a roaring noise filled the spacious chamber. This appeared to shock Orochimaru and Kabuto, and Naruto looked at Hitsugaya as the wind and noise subsided. "Toshiro, let me handle Orochimaru. You take care of the four-eyed traitor." Hitsugaya nodded without saying anything. "Sure thing. Since Unohana and Uzumaki Kushina are the only two individuals more terrifying than Naruto, I probably shouldn't argue with him while he's feeling this way." Hitsugaya used Flash Step to appear in front of a startled Kabuto, who immediately grabbed his neck and ran across the area with Orochimaru's henchman in his grasp. He rolled his neck in anticipation of getting this battle over with. When they arrived at a similar chamber, Hitsugaya flung Kabuto across the room, and the four-eyed shinobi grunted as he slammed into the wall on the other side. "At least I know he's not fast," Hitsugaya told himself in his mind. "That's definitely something I can take advantage of." "Hey," Kabuto chuckled softly to himself as he rose gradually from the little heap of debris he was perched on. "So, it looks like I'm up against a little kid, huh? How hilarious." With a look of silent annoyance on his face, Hitsugaya slowly unsheathed his Zanpakuto as the corner of his mouth twitched. "I'm not a kid, four eyes. Sit upon the frosted heavens, Hiranmaru." An icy gust of wind blew across the chamber, making Kabuto's already cold hair even colder as he covered his face with his arm. A very thin layer of ice appeared on his skin, growing until it threatened to freeze his entire right arm, and his eyes widened. What power is this? Astonished by the enormous Ryotsu that Hitsugaya had just released, he pondered. Furthermore, what is Hiranmaru? So, Kabuto wrapped his left hand in chakra and used it to swing over his icy right arm, piercing the thin layer of ice that covered it. "This is certainly an interesting ninjutsu that you're using. I'm guessing that this is your Kekkei Genkai." Hitsugaya gave a blink. Hitsugaya swung his Zanpakuto across the air, creating a huge wave of ice that rushed towards a startled Kabuto. "What? You think I'm using a Kekkei Genkai? That's hardly the case. This," he raised his Zanpakuto, "is my Zanpakuto, Hiranmaru. With it, I can manipulate the water in the air, turning it into ice and using it as I see fit. Don't worry, four eyes, this battle will be over in a blink of an eye." Kabuto flipped over the wave of ice, slashing at it with his right hand as he went over it, and he also generated a thin layer of chakra around his right hand. To Kabuto's surprise, however, the attack only succeeded in slicing through half of it. After all, this is more than just ice. He must have used his chakra to power it up. He surprised Kabuto by appearing in front of him with a flash step, then swung his sword at him with the intention of cutting him from the chest down. But Kabuto caught this out of the corner of his eye and used his chakra enhanced hands to block the attack just in time. The chakra coating prevented his hands from being sliced off entirely, but it did very little in the way of protection. Kabuto grimaced in agony, suppressing the urge to scream aloud, and covered his bleeding right hand with his left, using his medical ninjutsu to heal both hands at once. This caused Hitsugaya's eyes to enlarge, and he sped in Kabuto's direction, creating a huge ice dragon that roared as he flew in the direction of the four-eyed Irio.nin. I'm not an expert in healing Kido, but his abilities suggest that he could develop into a skilled healer like Unohana, so Naruto and Soifun weren't lying when they said that ninjas could also employ healing techniques. Regretfully, he will not have the opportunity to live long enough to develop his abilities. Due to his injuries, Kabuto was only able to leap back because he was too preoccupied with healing both of his hands to notice the ice dragon in time. The dragon of ice only managed to scrape Kabuto's side as it fell to the ground below. Kabuto flinched in agony as he was hurled to the other side of the room, where he hit the wall with a loud thud. Damn it. With his hands clasped behind his back, Kabuto hurried towards Hitsugaya while mentally cursing. I refuse to let him know that my hands are nearly healed. Still without his hands, Kabuto gave the young captain a roundabout kick while feigning a grimace to indicate that he was still hurt. Kabuto was shocked when Hitsugaya pointed his finger at him after he barely avoided the kick. Hado number 4. Byakurai. Hitsugaya smiled as he struck the Iryo.nin point blank in the stomach, releasing a stream of light blue lightning from his fingertip. Ga. Ah! Exclaimed Kabuto as the lightning streak stung his abdomen. He slammed into the earth below, gasping for air as blood spurted from his wound and he gazed down at the hole in his stomach. He dropped to his hands and knees, but as he felt something cold and sharp against his chin, he froze in mid-crawl. Kabuto slowly raised his head to see Hitsugaya standing above him, his blade point against his chin. "You're finished, 4 eyes," Hitsugaya said nonchalantly. He abruptly stopped talking when he saw that Kabuto was using his hands and feet to crawl, saying, "You can't use your hands, and you can't move around easily with that hole in your stomach, just W. Wait a second, I thought that your hand was." Hitsugaya screamed in agony, "Gah!" as Kabuto quickly slashed at his chest with his chakra-coated hands, landing a clean blow. With a gentle thud, he hit the ground and carefully used his middle and index fingers to touch the wound on his chest. "Che, it looks like you fooled me. I am surprised that you were able to heal your wounds so quickly while both of your hands were injured though. It looks like you're even more skilled than I thought." "Why thank you," Kabuto smiled. Kabuto cautiously approached the wounded captain, taking a scalpel from his pocket and holding it inverted like a kunai. "Well, this is the end of the line for you, I'm afraid." Kabuto grinned goodbye to Hitsugaya while holding the scalpel high above his head. "See you, kid." Hitsugaya clenched his jaw in exasperation and swung his Zanpakuto in front of him, striking Kabuto in the jaw. Glaring angrily at the captain of the 10th Division, Kabuto retreated in agony and touched the scrape on his jaw. "So you can still fight with that wound, huh?" "Che." Hitsugaya scuffed at Kabuto as if he had just said something absurd and slowly stood up with little effort. "This wound? It's barely a scratch, nonetheless a wound. Don't underestimate me, 4 eyes. I took half a step back at the last moment, dodging a good portion of the range of your attack." "I see." Kabuto's hand abruptly blinked out in front of him, sending the scalpel hurtling toward Hitsugaya's expression. Hitsugaya froze the scalpel with a cold wind and raised his Zanpakuto with his wrist in an upward motion. The scalpel froze in midair and fell to the ground, landing innocuously next to Hitsugaya's feet. He looked over his shoulder abruptly and grimaced a little when he saw Ichigo's Ryotsu varying. "Che, I have to move quickly to finish this because it appears that Kurosaki Ichigo is already facing the group of enemies that are approaching this hideout. With this little fry, I can't waste any more time." Hitsugaya rolled his neck and then, with unexpected speed, flashed behind a startled Kabuto, slashing downward at the air in front of Kabuto's feet. Suddenly, a lot of ice gathered at Kabuto's feet and continued to build up until it formed a solid pillar of ice that encased Kabuto from the waist down. Damn it. Kabuto spit out. "You." He stopped talking suddenly as Hitsugaya stabbed him in the chest. "You." Hitsugaya said, "Sorry, kid," in a composed voice. "I'm afraid that I can't waste any more time here." Around the sword wound, a thin layer of ice formed and grew until Kabuto was completely encased in a solid layer of ice. The ice casket broke with Kabuto after a terrifying second, leaving thousands of glistening ice fragments floating in midair before vanishing into thin air. A sudden surge of Ryotsu from outside the hideout caused Hitsugaya to flinch, as if startled. "What a waste." Kurosaki took his cloak off. Hitsugaya whirled around and raced to the hideout's entrance, his haori flapping behind him. In the interim, as it whistled over his head, Naruto quickly ducked into a crouch, barely avoiding Orochimaru's sword of Kusanagi. He immediately leapt away, but the Sannin's special sword just swung out at an unexpected rate, the blade's tip pointed directly at Naruto's heart. "Che." Naruto grimaced, raised his sword, and deflected the blow just in time, but the force of the sword's constant extension sent him flying into the wall. "Oh no, I didn't realize how strong the white shit was." Naruto lifted his free hand and gestured to Orochimaru with his index finger. "Hado number 4, Byakurai." The next second was released as a concentrated blue, white lightning bolt formed at the tip of Naruto's finger, streaking across the area in the direction of the startled Sannin. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes at the word. "Hado." "Hado number 4, Orochimaru leapt back to avoid the attack. He pondered. So this boy picked up Sway Feng's unusual ninjutsu? Very intriguing. On the other side of the room behind Orochimaru, the pale lightning bolt struck the corner of the wall, causing a tiny explosion that sent a large amount of debris falling from the ceiling. "You've gotten stronger, Naruto-kun," Orochimaru hissed, sounding both a little pleased and irritated. "That ninjutsu that you just used, Where did you learn it? I'm curious as to how you gained the ability to manipulate lightning. Natured chakra like that. At this, Naruto scowled and pressed the edge of his blade to his shoulder. Naruto raised his open hand and narrowed his eyes as he recited the chant for another Kido spell. Ninjutsu. Lightning. Natured chakra. You fought once before and even you can't figure it out? Didn't you hear the word Hado? The way of destruction. It's obviously not ninjutsu, Baka, but still, you were surprised by that? Well, let me show you this as well, you scum. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes as a ball of bright yellow lightning formed in front of Naruto's hand. Sprinkled on the bones of the beast, sharp tower, red crystal, steel ring. Move and become the wind, stop and become the calm. The sound of warring spears fills the empty castle. As the orb began to flicker and release tiny streams of lightning in a frenzied manner, Naruto smiled. Hado number 63. Raikoho. Thud. On its way to Orochimaru, the chamber's right side was totally destroyed by a massive stream of lightning. As the attack came to an end, a massive cloud of smoke filled the room. As the smoke gradually dissipated, Orochimaru was seen on the ground, suffering severe injuries from the Kido spell. Naruto gazed at the injured adversary, blinking, his face motionless. With his face smeared with blood, Orochimaru glared at Naruto and struggled to raise his head. A chant, S-O-T. That's what the CH chant was for. You pages powered up your A. Attack TH. Through a chant S. Somehow, I would have N. Never expected that. N Naruto.kun. Naruto.kun. Naruto. Hissed Orochimaru. Yelling the final phrase, a huge white snake that resembled Orochimaru slithered out of his human body, hissing in rage as he gazed at Naruto through his snake eyes. His body began to shake violently, and his skin appeared to shed. Naruto.kun. I don't know what kind of power you've attained, but I know that it's mine to take. Now relax, and become a part of me. You'll make an excellent substitute for Sasuke.kun. Then, with his mouth agape for the kill, Orochimaru swung at a startled Naruto. Come to me, Naruto.kun. Naruto jumped out of the way just in time, but he was caught off guard and could hardly avoid the lunge. Suddenly, hundreds of tiny white snakes sprang from Orochimaru's scaled body and lunged at Naruto in his place, successfully trapping both his legs and Zanpakuto. Damn it. Naruto called out the release command for his Zanpakuto, which he had resealed at some point, and raised it in the air with some difficulty while glaring at Orochimaru. Open the floodgates, kamikaze. Orochimaru's eyes widened in shock as a flash of lightning, wind, and water split his tiny army of snakes in two. What is this, you sword? Naruto said, this is my Zanpakuto, kamikaze, while displaying his Zanpakuto in front of him. He winced inwardly as he fought to stay upright. Also, it's the sword that's going to bisect you just like it did to your precious little snakes over there. Damn it. Those snakes hurt me more than I realize. Fortunately, I won't be able to move as fast as I usually can in this condition. Naruto activated Kurama's shroud, raised his sword high into the air, and used the incredible speed that came with that form to leap behind Orochimaru. Then, he slammed his sword down with all of his strength on the Sannin. A minute later, Naruto stood over Orochimaru's enormous snake body, which had been nearly destroyed by his Kurama. Enhanced attack, while releasing Kurama's shroud. Naruto turned around quickly as a loud rumbling noise came from behind him, and his eyes widened in shock. Orochimaru, it's over you snake scum, what the? A huge white creature erupted out of the ground in front of him, and the ground exploded. The creature's enormous size caused the ground beneath them to collapse, and Naruto screamed as he fell beneath the underground chamber. He fell more than 150 feet before landing in a crouched position on a pile of rubble. What on earth was that? What the hell? Naruto looked up, watching in amazement at what he saw. What the fuck, Orochimaru, you? An enormous eight-headed serpent with scales and 5 tall ivory spikes behind it was in front of him. Standing atop the enormous serpent, holding his sword of Kusanagi, was Orochimaru, who had once again assumed his human form. The Sannin wheezed, Naruto.kun, grinning bloodthirstily. This is my ultimate technique, the 8 branches jutsu. This jutsu transcends the realm of snakes and borders the realm of dragons. The snake's scaled underbelly flattened and trampled everything in its path as it advanced. Naruto reactivated Kurama's shroud and narrowed his eyes. Naruto stabbed his Zanpakuto into the ground and extended both of his hands toward the ground in front of him, saying, let's do this, Orochimaru. It's time for me to rid you from this world for good. Hado number 1. Show. Naruto grabbed his Zanpakuto as the ground in front of him burst into a massive cloud of dust. Then, using this makeshift smokescreen, he sped behind the serpent, swinging his released Zanpakuto at it while creating a storm of wind, lightning, and water. Thud! The giant serpent was knocked back more than 5 feet by the fierce storm, and it was severely damaged by the Kurama enhanced Shikai attack that totally avoided the steel hard scales. Orochimaru, caught off guard, squinted as he swiftly spun around to confront the direction of Naruto's attack. Orochimaru hissed, "Damn you, Naruto-kun, 8 branches, attack," loudly. At the command of its master, the enraged serpent lunged at Naruto. The ground appeared to burst from the impact as the serpent's teeth dug into the earth, but Naruto managed to dodge the attack in time. What a strong assault! As he skidded to a stop, Naruto said to himself. However, its only strength is its steel hard scales, and it is nevertheless slow. It's over once I get past that. Kurama, let's get this done, kamikaze. With both hands gripping the hilt, Naruto swung his Zanpakuto as hard as he could at him. So he roared, "Go, kamikaze." The entire underground space was literally ripped apart by the ferocity of the attack, and the air itself seemed to tremble. With a grimace, Orochimaru ducked inside the serpent to avoid the attack, protecting his face with his arm. Oh no! This isn't possible. Naruto was standing over a severely injured Orochimaru a moment after the attack had stopped, with the serpent lying more than 20 feet away from the two. He held his Zanpakuto over him, pointing down, and looked down at the Sannin with a sorrowful expression. Naruto said, "This is for Konoha, now burn in hell where you belong," before slicing the Sannin with his blade, instantly killing him. With a sigh of relief, Naruto sheathed his blade and picked up the sword of Kusanagi, straightening up and closing his eyes. "Kamikaze, Kurama." Kamikaze exclaimed, "Hey!" Naruto imagined a smug grin on his face. "It seems that the battle lifted a great burden from your shoulders, Naruto, but still, remember that if you want to really free yourself in the shinobi world from the past, you'll have to deal with him as well as your old comrades." "Yay!" Naruto let out a frustrated sigh, "I know." Kurama scowled as Naruto emerged from his mental realm. Since the start of the entire shinobi world mission, Naruto and Kamikaze have both been acting much more solemnly. Naruto's eyes opened when he became aware of Ichigo's erratic Ryotsu. Oh no, they've arrived. Knowing deep down that he would have to fight his teammates himself, despite his desire to avoid hurting them, Naruto put on his mask and jumped out of the hole and raced towards the cave's entrance. Outside the hiding place, Ichigo was watching the entrance to Orochimaru's hideout as Team Kakashi and Team Kurenai raced across the rocky wasteland. Kiba growled, "Are we almost there yet?" Loudly. "This is taking forever." Hinata pleaded cautiously, Please be patient, Kiba-kun. W. We should be there soon." "Shay." Kiba sneered impatiently. "I just want to hurry up and kill that Orochimaru bastard myself." Shino said, "You should be more patient," in his typically composed tone. "Why is that?" "Because being annoyed won't get us there any faster." A huge boulder that resembled a rocky mountain was directly in front of them, and Sasuke narrowed his eyes. "We're here, and..." Hinata felt something and looked up abruptly. "Everyone, stop." Sakura gave her a curious look as the two teams stopped. "What is it, Hinata?" "Byakugan." Hinata squinted as she looked around, rocking back to find the source of the powerful presence she had previously sensed. It's the people who attacked Konoha earlier." The two groups watched in disbelief as they gazed up at the enormous boulder and the figure perched atop it. "It's been a long time since we've last crossed paths, Sasuke. Do you remember me?" Sasuke grasped his sword's hilt and glared up at the figure. "Oh, don't worry, you'll be nothing but a bad memory after I defeat you here and now, Kurosaki Ichigo." "It's been a long time since we've last crossed paths, Sasuke. Do you remember me?" Sasuke grasped his sword's hilt and glared up at the figure. "Oh, don't worry, you'll be nothing but a bad memory after I defeat you here and now, Kurosaki Ichigo." Ichigo grabbed his sword's hilt as he landed on the ground below him using his flash step. "You should know that it won't be that easy," Ichigo remarked, frowning slightly. "I thought that you would have learned that after I kicked your ass the last time we crossed paths." Kiba glanced first at Ichigo and then at Sasuke. "Sasuke, is this really the guy that beat you, Sakura and Sai by himself?" Sasuke gave a nod of agreement. "Yay, it's hard to forget an opponent like that, Kiba." Kiba gave Ichigo a wild smile and rolled his neck in anticipation. "Kurosaki Ichigo, he sure doesn't look like much." Ichigo shot back, "You're one to talk, puppy boy," which caused Kiba to frown angrily. Ichigo was in the middle of saying, Anyways, Sasuke, you and your friends better not hold back this time. I won't go easy on. When an enraged Kiba and his dog, partner Akamaru charged at him. Jiraiya warned, Kiba-san, don't, knowing full well that this man was far above the Chunin's level. However, Kiba disregarded the Toad Sage's warning out of rage. A poor decision on his part. Ichigo easily sidestepped Kiba's attack and grabbed him by the collar before hurling the Inuzuka clansman with unexpected strength at the enormous boulder that resembled a mountain behind him. It was a display of speed and agility that Sasuke and his teammates remembered all too well. With a kick powerful enough to leave a small crater, Ichigo then jumped into the air and swung his leg at Akamaru, knocking the dog out. Both Jiraiya and Kakashi were taken aback by this. Not only did Ichigo knock Kiba out with such ease, but the orange-haired teenager did it while he wasn't even giving the young Chunin much attention. Geez. Ichigo looked at the two unconscious figures and scratched the back of his head. I hadn't even finished my sentence yet. Ichigo sighed as he looked up into Sasuke's and the others' irate glares. He paused for a moment, trying to remember his warning to them, and said, "Don't worry about them. They're still alive. Though they're both out of the fight. Anyways, as I was saying, I won't go easy on you guys this time." Sasuke calmed down and began to slowly unwind a bandage, like wrapping around his right arm, which Ichigo had recognized from their previous battle, while looking back at Kakashi and Jiraiya. "Kakashi, Jiraiya, I need you to help Sakura and the others hold this guy back for 3 minutes." Kakashi immediately looked up to gaze at Ichigo after glancing down at Sasuke's arm. "Are you planning on releasing that?" Sasuke gave a curt nod. "Yay, since there's no inhabited towns nearby for several miles around us, I can do so safely. Also, Guy's team won't be arriving for a while, so we're on own until then." Ichigo said, "What are you talking about, Sasuke?" with a hint of annoyance. "Do you have some sort of trump card or something?" After Sasuke had completed removing the bandage from his right arm, he turned his shoulder to reveal a black design that was strikingly similar to his Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. It consisted of 3 ellipses that intersected, with a shuriken in the center. After hollowing out the center of the shuriken, the kanji for seal was inscribed upon it. He said, "Do you get it now?" Ichigo saw this and smiled. "So that's why your attacks felt so weak." Ichigo pointed his Zanpakuto at Sasuke after he and Sasuke nodded. Ichigo grabbed his cloak by the shoulder and removed it in a single motion after stabbing his Zanpakuto into the ground. "In that case, I should probably use 100% of my strength as well, right?" Ichigo asked. Sasuke was among those who appeared taken aback by the abrupt shuddering motion emanating from the earth beneath. The sudden burst of energy from Ichigo appeared to shock Hinata, and she clasped her hands together in front of her chest. His power seems oddly similar to Naruto. Kun's. W. Who is this person? Sai, who had been standing silently next to Sakura, squinted as he sensed Ichigo's cloak being taken off. Thus, Ichigo and his companions must be stifling their abilities with their cloaks. Shay. Ichigo sliced his sealed Zanpakuto through the air after yanking it from the ground. Suddenly, the sword changed into his typical oversized kyber knife. "Let's go, Sasuke." He then sped toward the Konoha ninjas, his sword following in his wake. Sasuke closed his eyes and slammed his hands together, concentrating on releasing his seal while releasing a lot of chakra. With the tip of his Zanpakuto dragging on the ground behind him, Ichigo squinted as he charged at Sasuke. Ichigo swung at him and said, "Do you really think that I'll let you do that? Then, don't even think about it, Sasuke." When Kakashi unexpectedly moved between them, obstructing Ichigo's swing with his late father's white light chakra saber, a tanto, Ichigo's eyes widened. Ichigo squinted to try to block out the white sparks that flew everywhere as the two blades collided. Kakashi took advantage of this by revealing his Sharingan through the slanted mask that covered his eye. He then rolled onto his hands, spun around, and kicked Ichigo with both feet. When Ichigo noticed this, he quickly deflected the blow with his arm and swung his sword down at Kakashi. After avoiding the swing with the help of his Sharingan, Kakashi quickly leapt back up and used his tanto to stab the orange-haired Shinigami. Ichigo threw aside his tanto and raised his blade to try to cut Kakashi's face in two, but Kakashi was able to stoop back enough to avoid the blow, and they clashed blades once more, narrowing their eyes as they attempted to break the impasse. Ichigo attempted to retreat, but Sakura suddenly materialized beside him and swung her fist in a broad arc, causing him to duck. She barely missed Ichigo by a centimeter as her fist swung over his head. As Sakura released her yin seal, the ground beneath them cracked and the very air shook with the force of the attack. Ichigo squinted and jumped back from the kunoichi. "Che," he exclaimed. "Once more, that annoying brute strength. Although she is skilled, She is not as good as Sasuke, and I will be in serious trouble if she hits me with even one clean blow. He glanced at Sakura in shock as she abruptly performed several hand seals as he skidded to a stop. A jutsu? Ichigo felt the ground beneath him tremble, and he abruptly wobbled in place. Ichigo was unable to avoid the attack in time as large tree roots abruptly rose up out of the ground and encircled him. What on earth is this? Ichigo frowned as he struggled to break free. Damn it, it's just too powerful, I am unable to. Ichigo. Ichigo recognized Zangetsu's voice, and his eyes grew wide. Old man, I can't free myself from. Ichigo. Zangetsu repeated sharply. Can't you feel it? This is not like the jutsus that you saw back in Konoha. She's trapping your mind in an illusion by distorting your flow of Ryotsu. Huh? Zangetsu let out a frustrated sigh, and Ichigo felt a chilly sensation as though Zangetsu was touching his head with his fingers. All that's needed to free you from this illusion is to snap you out of it. Bear with this, Ichigo. A sharp pain against his side caused Ichigo to yell aloud. He shook his head and turned to face the startled Konoha group, who had just been released from Sakura's genjutsu. As long as they are in sync with their Zanpakuto, Shinigami have no trouble breaking free from a ninja's genjutsu, in contrast to Aizen's flawless total hypnosis. A Jinchuriki who has a close bond with his Biju is comparable to this. Sakura appeared completely taken aback by what had transpired. This guy. How could he have so effortlessly exited a high-level genjutsu? I learned this jutsu directly from Kurenai Sensei. Sai performed several hand seals while clamping his jaw around his scroll, which he used for his primary jutsu. Sweden. Miniature exploding water colliding wave jutsu. He inhaled deeply and spit out a large volume of water from his mouth before spitting the scroll into the air. As everyone jumped onto their own rocks to avoid the body of water, the area was submerged in more than a foot of water. Sai grabbed his scroll before it could hit the water, pulled out his ink brush and ink supply, and, to Ichigo's surprise, splattered his ink supply across the water while holding his ink brush in his mouth. Curious, he said, what the hell was that for? Now you can't use your jutsu, dumbass. With his head tilted to the right, Sai grinned broadly at Ichigo. Please don't make crude assumptions based on what you see. Besides not having a dick, are you also missing a brain? With a humorous frown, Ichigo spit out, I've had enough of your lame comebacks, you pale dick. Obsessed freak, I'm going to kick your ass so hard you won't know Konoha from Suna. Ichigo swung at Sai, sending his blade high into the air and creating a blue crescent wave with its tip. Getsuga Tensho. Sai swiftly executed 5 hand seals, and a huge wave that was 20 feet high and served as a shield appeared to burst out of the inky water in front of him. The wave was easily dispersed by Ichigo's Getsuga Tensho, and it was insufficient to stop the entire attack. However, the area where Sai had been standing was deserted after the attack ended. Ichigo squinted as he turned swiftly, bringing his sword up just in time to stop Sai's tanto before it could cut his neck. Che? Ichigo sneered angrily. Ichigo yelled, don't mess around with me, you idiot, and shoved Sai away, sending him flying back more than 10 feet. Sai took his ink brush from his mouth and, with startling speed, drew 5 lions as he unraveled his scroll. Then he looked intently at Ichigo and made a hand seal. Ninpo. Beast imitation drawing jutsu. The sped flew out of the scroll and, to Ichigo's complete surprise, jumped into the dark body of water as the 5 drawing came to life with a roar. Ichigo looked down at the water and blinked, perplexed. Why did they? When the 5 lions leapt out of the water in front of Ichigo, it appeared as though it would explode, but something wasn't right. They were roughly Akamaru's size when they jumped into the water, but now they were more than 5 times larger. Ichigo's expression was one of shock as he gazed up at the imposing creatures. What the F? He exclaimed, leaping to the side as the 5 lions charged at him, destroying the big rock he was standing on. So powerful. Ichigo swung his sword at them, his eyes narrowing. Getsuga Tensho. The beasts were wiped out entirely as the crescent wave raced towards them. However, Ichigo scowled as he wiped some ink off his face, and the ink splattered everywhere around him. He was distracted by the ink and didn't notice Sai performing a series of intricate hand seals in silence. The ink that had splashed all over Ichigo appeared to come to life, and his eyes widened in surprise. Several ink snakes were formed by the twisting of the ink splatters, and Ichigo was quickly encircled by the snakes before he could move. Kakashi grinned as he stood next to Jiraiya. Just recently, Sai was able to master his beast imitation drawing jutsu. With preparation, he can now draw ink beasts without using an ink brush. Ichigo grimaced and inhaled deeply as he was about to launch the attack, but he was suddenly immobilized as Kakashi repeatedly wrapped steel wires around him, trapping him even more. Shit. I am completely immobile, mentally cursed Ichigo. At this pace, He heard what sounded like a strong wind gust in front of him and looked up. Hinata had been standing quietly apart from the group, but now she was running toward Ichigo with her arms out at her waist. With the words, "Gentle step. Twin lion fists." Hinata pulled both fists, now encased in energy in the shape of lion heads, back for the final blow. Ichigo closed his eyes and appeared to calm down as he accepted the blow almost voluntarily. His head snapped back when Hinata's fist struck his chest. This appeared to surprise everyone, and they all stood motionless, gazing at Ichigo's lifeless body. Is it over?" Hinata inquired. A voice behind her said, "Not even close," and everyone turned around in disbelief. The Ichigo in front of Hinata abruptly vanished, leaving behind nothing but a piece of cloth. With an almost lazy motion, the real Ichigo swung his sword at the startled Hinata, who was standing calmly behind him. Not so fast. Ichigo easily dodged two kusarigamas that were speeding toward him, but Hinata managed to get away unharmed because the attack was enough of a distraction. Ichigo scoffed and straightened up, pointing his sword at Sakura. "Shay," he exclaimed. After stealthily approaching Ichigo from behind, Kakashi abruptly accelerated and slashed at him with his tanto. "Huh?" Ichigo turned swiftly and deflected his blow, smiling at him as their blades brushed against one another. "Don't think you can get me with such a Rasengan." Thud. Ichigo deftly sidestepped Jiraiya's blow, which slammed into the ground where he had been moments before, and the ground appeared to tear apart. That attack. Where did he find out? Ichigo scowled as he turned to face Jiraiya and examined the damage caused by the assault. "What is that attack? And where did you learn it?" "Rasengan," Jiraiya said again. "My former student Minato, the fourth Hokage, was the creator of this jutsu, and he's the one that taught it to me." When Ichigo heard the name of Naruto's father and another Shinigami, he blinked in surprise. "Oh, so are you the Toad Sannin guys that I've heard about?" With his arms extended in a dramatic pose, the Sannin grinned and said, "Oh, so you've heard of me, have you?" Jiraiya took a deep breath and twirled his long, spiked hair in a circle. "To think that even an outsider has heard of my name. Well, allow me to introduce myself," he said. He jumped back immediately when Ichigo materialized in front of him, hacking the Sannin in half with an uppercut motion. "Oi!" Jiraiya scowled, his expression humorous. "If you're going to interrupt me, at least wait until I'm in mid-sentence." Ichigo leaned the edge of his blade against his shoulder and smiled. Mocking, "Sorry about that, old man," he said. "I didn't mean to interrupt your amazing self-introduction, but it just was so boring that I let my hand slip." Ichigo pulled his sword back and swung at Jiraiya as he was about to yell a reply. "Getsuga, bore." When Ichigo swung his blade, he was surprised to see hundreds of huge, blue energy blasts in the shape of arrow points instead of the blue crescent wave that had previously erupted from the sword's tip. Ichigo yelled, "You're through, old man," as Jiraiya struggled to avoid the onslaught. "You rakery." When Ichigo turned around, he saw Kakashi racing toward him with lightning blue chakra wrapped around his hand. Oh shit. Time seemed to slow to a crawl, and he seemed to freeze in midair until Hado number 33. Sokatsui. The hand was a millimeter from Ichigo's chest, and Kakashi pulled it back to avoid being blown off by a stream of blue lightning. Like energy. What in the world was that? Ichigo looked up slowly and was startled to see a familiar figure standing in midair, dressed in a tan, frayed cloak and wearing the standard black Shinigami uniform. Rukia, What in the world? Kakashi cried in shock. His jaw dropped, and he turned to Jiraiya. How can she levitate on air? Is this some kind of wind? Attribute Keke Genkai, he exclaimed. Jiraiya. Sama, is this woman one of the two members of Sui Feng's team that was spotted in the land of grass? Gazing down at the pile of dirt before him, Jiraiya crossed his arms and shook his head. No, I'm afraid not. Sakura realized something and looked up in surprise. So does this mean that there's now 6 opponents that we have to deal with? I'm afraid so, Sakura. He looked up at Rukia, his body tense, and uncrossed his arms. Stay on alert. We don't know what she's capable of. Rukia remained steady as she watched the group from Konoha, flash stepping to Ichigo's side. With her eyes fixed on the front, she said, Ichigo, are you alright? Yay, Ichigo answered calmly. Anyways, what are you doing here, Rukia? I thought that you. Rukia interrupted him, saying, I'll explain everything later after we deal with these guys, instead. Ichigo nodded and smiled, assuming a combat stance. Are you sure that you can handle it though? We've fought against these ninja before, and I can tell you that they're not holding back like last time. It could get pretty rough. Baka. Rukia sneered as she struck Ichigo in the crown of his head. Ichigo noticed that she was wearing a lieutenant's armband when she raised her arm to his face and asked, "Did you forget about this? In case I have to remind you, I became the vice captain of my division 2 weeks before heading back to Karakura town. In any case, he didn't recommend me as his replacement just because we're close friends, you know. Besides, I've already dealt with the bug boy, so I can handle myself just fine." Ichigo and the Konoha shinobi became aware of Shino's disappearance after hearing this. "What did you do with Shino?" Sakura yelled into her rage. "What happened to him?" "I simply knocked him unconscious," Rukia said coolly. She abruptly stopped speaking as Kakashi and Sakura raced toward her and Ichigo. Sakura pulling back her fist to deliver a chakra enhanced blow, and Kakashi brandishing his chakra blade. He won't be joining the battle, so get ready. Thud. Sakura and Kakashi both flew backwards as 2 white and yellow streaks struck them, halting their attacks. When Naruto and Hitsugaya approached Ichigo and Rukia, they both stood up straight. Naruto looked at the young captain out of the corner of his eye and said, "Toshiro, can you handle the other approaching ninja?" In response, Hitsugaya nodded and flashed away, disappearing from view. Naruto looked at Rukia and Ichigo after he left. He said, "Hey Ichigo, Rukia," with a warm greeting. Ichigo approached the blonde Shinigami and scowled, dismissing his abrupt greeting. His tone was irritated. "Save the greeting for later," he said. "So are those 2 dead?" Holding up Orochimaru's sword for him to see, Naruto nodded. "See for yourself." Jiraiya appeared completely taken aback upon seeing the sword in Naruto's grasp. Is that what I think it is?" "Hey," Naruto smiled from behind his mask, which he used once more following the battle. "Yes. It's the legendary sword of Kusanagi, a gift from the late Orochimaru." Kakashi appeared to suddenly freeze, and his eyes widened in shock. But that means that." "That's right," Naruto explained. "Orochimaru is no longer among the living. To put it simply, I killed him off myself." This shocked the Konoha ninja, Sakura in particular. If he killed that white snake bastard by himself, how strong is this guy? But before any of the ninja could speak aloud, a silent chakra shockwave shook the area, stopping them in their tracks. Finally releasing his seal, Sasuke stretched out his arms, rolled his neck, and broke apart his joined hands. He reached into his ninja tool bag behind his back and produced a scroll that resembled the one Sakura used to store her kusarigamas. He unfolded it and saw the kanji for fire written in the center. A pillar of smoke surrounded Sasuke, and he narrowed his eyes as it poured out of the seal. He was seen holding a gunbai, or war fan, in his right hand after the smoke had cleared. The fan was dark gray, the same shade as his sleeveless shirt, and it had 3 symbols emblazoned on it on either side. Konoha, the Uzushio symbol that was on the back of the Konoha flak jackets, and the Uchiha clan. Naruto narrowed his eyes and gazed intently at the gunbai, as if taken aback by its appearance. "Wait a second, is that?" As he whipped the gunbai out by his side, Sasuke asked dramatically, "So you recognize it?" He looked at the Shinigami group and laughed. "Well, you should. It's the same gunbai that was once wielded by Uchiha Madara."
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.